to come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I bought a dog that killed the calf, that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello, and thank you for your patience on this episode. It has been too long in the oven. I did a lot of traveling in the last 2 months, not only on the road doing stand-up, but I'm also working on another film project with Bobcat Goldthwait that I will be telling you about in more detail in the near future. Here's a little hint. It brought us to the wilds of upstate New York, specifically Poughkeepsie. Think about it. Think about it. Anyway, it simply became difficult to get all the moving parts of this episode synced up for production, but I hope the final result will more than make up for it, and now we can get back on schedule. Our first guest today, Jackie Brown. The real person, not the Quentin Tarantino film character portrayed by Pam Grier. The real Jackie Brown grew up in the Pacific Northwest. She didn't have it easy. In fact, I dare say she's never had it easy. Jackie didn't so much grow up as survive her childhood. She was, however, blessed with good genes and decided to enter a beauty pageant. Not for the narcissistic boost, but it was a better way out of her circumstances than just joining the military. She ended up making it all the way to the Miss America pageant, where she placed third. She then took her winnings and used them to pursue her dream. She moved to LA to become a comedian. This was not what the Miss America Pageant Incorporated envisioned for Jackie. For one thing, it had a much bigger potential for controversy than cutting the ribbon at a new shopping mall. Jackie actually came down here and developed into a really good comedian. Dark, edgy, genuinely edgy, as opposed to fake edgy. She doesn't go off on a rant on how much she hates Starbucks. Ooh. But that's how I ended up meeting Jackie. And when I learned her backstory, I thought she would make a great interview. But when we started talking, I realized that I did not know the headline of the story. And what Jackie Brown has been going through in the past couple of years is fascinating, horrifying, and enraging. So give it a listen. Hang in there with it. Jackie Brown. We all should be as tough as she is. Then we will rocket immediately back into being ridiculous. True Tales from Weirdsville takes a deep dive into, again, something that seemed interesting on its surface, but when you scratch the surface, you learn a much more fascinating story lying underneath. A story more interesting than anyone knew. The making of Jaws 2. It's a much more interesting story than the one that was projected on screen. Then we'll wrap the show with a wonderful interview with the spookily talented Maurice Lamarche. Maurice is one of the preeminent voice actors in animation right now, as well as being a terrific comedian and actor in his own right. Probably most known as the voice of the Brain in Pinky and the Brain, he stands, along with our own announcer Tom Kenny, as one of the giants in animation voice acting. Me? I'm glad you asked. March 23rd, 24th, and 25th, I will be at one of my favorite comedy clubs in America, Helium, in Portland, Oregon, land of the food truck. April 14th, 15th, and 16th, I will be at the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, Indiana. And the following week, April 20th, 21st, and 22nd, I will be in Austin, Texas, at the Moon Tower Comedy Festival. And then it's early May, and we begin shooting Season 3 of Hanging with Dr. Z. Big thanks to everyone who contributed to our Kickstarter and made this possible. I can't wait to get to work on it. We will also be bringing you Hanging with Dr. Z live at Dynasty Typewriter on April 8th. Now, most of these tickets have gone to our Kickstarter contributors, but there will be some available for the punters. Go to danagould.com for information on that and all the other shows and things mentioned on the stuff that I do in this pile of whatever. Lastly, thank God. If you like the show, please consider being a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. Go to danagould.com and sign up for our Patreon or Patreon. $5 a month gets you some extra audio content, some video content, and some junk. We don't have graduated levels. $5 a month and you get some stuff. Don't be a shy cadet. Be a Sky Cadet. It's a simple deal for complicated times. And now, it's on to our filthy business.
Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour podcast.
The Dana Gould Hour. Free and worth it.
It is a beautiful sunny day here high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf in sunny Southern California. It's February. It's not too cold, not too hot. It's kind of a nice day as we get in February. And we're still recovering from having rain, which has sent the city reeling. We had 2 solid days of rain, and it was like the moon fell into the surface of the earth. But my guest is really, really fascinating person. She is a professional comedian of some repute, really funny, which in and of itself is not necessarily out of the ordinary. What is extraordinary is, in addition to being a very funny comedian, she is a former Miss America contestant who placed very high in her pageant, I guess you would call it. And at a tender age, I don't know the specifics of your age. I'm assuming it still starts with a 2. You've already had a heart attack. Please welcome a house with many rooms, Jackie Brown, not the movie.
Hi. Thank you for having me. This is the first thing I've done since anything happened. So
We did a show together at Supernova. The first thing one thinks when they see you is like, oh, she's a comedian? Oh, she's too pretty to be a comedian. She can't be funny. She's too pretty.
No, it's real. It's real. It really happens.
We can unpack that. Because
For sure.
my wife endured that when she performed and the misogyny of that attitude. But you are super funny.
Thank you.
And you were literally in the Miss America pageant, which doesn't seem like something a comedian would do unless you were doing it ironically, which I don't think was the case.
Sometimes I wish I did. I mean, we had on-stage questions. It's on national television. And in hindsight, I'm like, damn, this could have been such a viral moment. I should have.
The reason that we were talking, the reason that I even became aware of the situation was you're down here in LA. You've been here for a while. You've been doing comedy for a while. Things are going well. And then, like most people down here, young person working in show business or wherever you're doing, you don't have extensive insurance. And then you get hit by a drunk driver who is not insured.
Yeah.
And that just throws everything into turmoil.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things where you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to, get through this.
Exist.
Yeah. Literally just trying to exist.
Seriously.
Yeah. Literally just trying to exist. It is a really galvanizing, infuriating story. When did this happen? How did it happen? What do you remember about it?
It was November 4th, 2021. It was a Thursday at like 7:00. So not super late. I guess I would assume drunk drivers would be out at like 1 or 2 in the morning, which I'm sure they are more. But I had just left work. I was a nanny. My day job was a nanny. And then in the evenings, I would do stand-up. I used to work in Sherman Oaks, and I was trying to get on the 101 freeway. So I'm at the intersection right before the last intersection before you get on the freeway. And I see this woman on Woodman going northbound in the southbound lane and slams on her brakes, reverses, and my light turns green. And so I'm like, I just need to get the fuck out of here. I don't want to be. I then take a right to get onto the on-ramp on the 101. And you know how you get when there's like the light turns green to let you merge and you're in the merge lane for a second? There was nowhere to go. There was just a ton of traffic. And I was just sitting there waiting for the light to let me merge. And she rear-ended me going, I think, about 60 miles an hour. And thankfully, I flew forward. Thankfully, there was no one in front of me. I hit my head. I hit my steering wheel. I got a concussion. I can't talk. I had a brain trauma. I'm fine, but sometimes it's hard for me to finish my sentences and think of the word I was trying to think of. Seatbelt. So that I remember hurting really bad. And maybe that's how I got ribs out, because I had 7 ribs out. I had a bunch of spinal injuries, whiplash in my neck.
What does ribs out mean?
It means
dislocated ribs?
Yeah, dislocated. And then there's a varying degree. There's out, but not dislocated, and
broken, or
I think broken or something, but it didn't require surgery. But yeah, it was just really fucked up by the neck and stuff.
Yeah.
When you sprain, I tore a bunch of muscles and ligaments. And I was kind of in shock, but it was a really weird experience. I think having a traumatic thing, I don't know, for me, I know it's different for everybody, but I remember hurting really bad, but I was really focused and kind of in this fight or flight response.
You're full of adrenaline.
Yeah, I was shaking really bad. And I remember her car hit me, and then she flew off to the side of me. And then I saw how bad her car was, and my car was really bad. I call the cops immediately, and then she gets out of her car and is banging on my window, hammered, can't even speak.
Right.
And I was afraid. We're on the freeway. I don't really know where she'd run.
Right.
I was afraid she was going to run. And I was on the phone with cops begging them to get there because I was scared too. I didn't know if she was going to hurt me. Right. She was trying to get me to roll down my window. And someone pulled over to the side because I was in my car and I didn't want to roll down my windows. And they pulled over. They're like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And then she told them, "Yeah," and we're fine. And they left. And I was like, "No, please stay." But the cops, thankfully, maybe because of the seriousness of the situation, and they just happened to be available, they showed up really quickly, which is shocking for LA.
Yeah, it is.
And they showed up. She was clearly hammered. They arrested her. But then I obviously then started. It was just my blood pressure. They were trying to take my vitals. It was so high. Everything was off the charts. I was just freaking out. Took me to the hospital. I don't know how many details you want, but
no, I want to go. Yeah.
Just a lot happened in the hospital.
Ambulance shows up, fire trucks, the whole deal. Yeah.
And no, actually, they showed up, but I refused them because I had health insurance, but you hear horror stories, and so I was driven to the hospital. I called someone and they picked me up and drove me to the hospital. Yeah. And because I was just I don't know. It was just, to me, just the idea of having a massive bill, and I didn't realize how bad it was,
right.
It's such an American thing to say. But now, in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't, because she didn't have insurance. That would have been another bill I would have had to pay. So glad I didn't, as fucked up as that sounds. After that, when I was released from the hospital, I was bedridden for months. I couldn't even lift. I was so weak, pain. I couldn't even lift myself out of bed. I had to have someone here taking care of me. Everything hurt. I couldn't, I'm still really tight because I never got fast forward, I never got treatment because she's uninsured and I lost my job and I lost my health insurance. But this is still really tight.
I can see.
And
Are you
I'm
moving?
in a lot of pain.
And this is over.
But then
this is a year and a half ago.
the thing that I've learned about the body is like, if you don't get treatment, stuff starts to not heal. And also the things that do heal improperly. And muscles that compensate and other muscles get weaker. And then just being bedridden for months, things atrophy and things get weak, so that I've just learned so much about the body, how everything's connected. You know, I don't want to like list everything that's going wrong, but I have just a bunch of spinal injuries and herniated discs and a bunch of stuff that's going. There's like spinal stenosis. There's like a bunch of words that it's called, but I won't bore you with that. But lying in bed there's a muscle that helps you lift. I couldn't even hold my phone up. Just this motion of that bringing my shoulder up was too painful. So I just had to fucking lie there and just stare at the ceiling. And I'm really scared of drugs. I have a lot of addiction in my family. And so they gave me morphine in the hospital and I was freaking out. Like I didn't want it. And they gave me a shot in my ass. They made me take it. And I ended up, I guess this can happen. I've never taken anything like that before, but if you heard something snorting, it's my dog, by the way, French bulldog.
Yeah, we live in an ark. We have a lot of critters, so no worries.
Okay, thanks.
We have a falcon. No, I'm kidding.
Are you serious?
No.
I was going to ask, but I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
No. You didn't want to take any painkillers because of your concerns about
addiction. Because I hear about so many people getting addicted. It sucks. It's horrible, and because you want to alleviate the pain. But it was crazy. I was in excruciating pain, like sobbing while I'm in there.
Sure,
like just horrible, horrible pain. And then about 15 minutes after the shot, I remember thinking like, oh, no wonder people get addicted to this. It was like, I not only didn't hurt, I didn't care. And then 15 minutes after that, started puking everywhere and like probably grossing people out. But historically, I'm really bad at being vulnerable about what I'm going through or having a hard time. I mean, it was really difficult, but one silver lining out of this situation was it's really taught me that you need help and that you need people around you and that people want to help. And there's so much trauma I had to unpack from my childhood that like made me this way. So that's been really tough. And I can't even say that I'm done. But no, I don't think
anybody finishes.
Right. Yeah.
But even in your Miss America bio, it says like you had a rough road getting to the pageant, and reading and knowing you, for the little I know you, it seemed to me that it was a way out of,
absolutely,
and that you took it in the way that for me stand up was a way out. And it was just like, this is a propulsive unit that I'm going to use to remove myself from a situation. Where did you grow up? What brought you to the position you were when you decided to become a pageant contestant?
I mean, I joke about it now, but it was like the Army. This isn't a joke, but I mean, it was like the Army for me. It was like, I know I'm not strong enough for the Army and I'm too much of a, wussy for that. So I saw it as a way out. And
yeah, I get that completely.
It's funny.
I get that completely. That's why I entered beauty pageants.
How'd that go for you?
Well, I was in the guys that looked like a toe pageant, so I actually did very well. Third runner up.
Wow.
But you grew up in Pacific Northwest?
Yeah. The Portland, Oregon area is the best way to describe it, that people know where you're talking about. But yeah, it's funny. I joke about this too, but people don't really think, because I grew up really poor and I call it white trash up there because I grew up white trash. So I'm not like talking shit about it. It was how I grew up.
You're not the only one in this conversation that grew up in that way.
Were you in the Pacific Northwest?
No, I was in the middle of Massachusetts, but it might as well have been upstate New York. I mean, I grew up in 6 kids in a 3-bedroom house full of stuffed deer heads and a lot of camo, a lot of guns, a lot of, and they're all, they're all still there and probably a lesser version of the same thing.
Yeah, I think people assume that it's all in the South, but
no, it's everywhere.
Pockets of,
it's everywhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've talked about this at length. My mom was a teenager when she got pregnant with me from a one-night stand. And so growing up with a single mom was really tough. We were really poor. We were homeless for periods of time. I don't get scared to talk about this because it's true. But more recently, when I've been talking about this, she's like threatened to sue me for talking about it. But
sounds like a great lady.
Yeah, she's swell. But I don't have contact with her. But in the ways that she has reached out, side note, when I was doing Miss America, you have to have a platform, which is something I already had because I know platform is like, I should explain it. It's like a cause you believe in or something you volunteer on.
Right.
And because the way I grew up, I was involved in different, like some people will say like a latchkey kid, but I was involved in a bunch of different programs that were for kids. And I really feel like that helped me I'm not a normal person, but a semi-normal functioning person because those mentors really were like parent figures to me. And they came to my musical theater stuff. And, if I had anything in my life, they were supporting me. So Miss America was not only a way out, but it was a really cool opportunity for me to be able to feel like I could give back in a way. Back when I did Miss America, I had to talk about this then. And one day I get a call from Miss America and they're like... The reigning
Miss America or the organization.
Like, hey. The organization.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were like, your mom has reached out to us threatening to sue because of... And this is me talking about like wanting to help other kids who grew up with addicts.
Right.
Like this isn't me going like, hey, this is my mom's name and number.
Right.
Go egg her house. Like this isn't about her at all.
Right. It's safe to say that she doesn't seem to be the kind of person, based on what you've told me, who, despite being your mother, put your needs first.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have memories of, I have a little brother. I feel like I'm going to cry. Sorry. This whole accident and like health stuff has really just brought a lot of stuff that I thought I worked through.
Mm-hmm. Well, it gets to vulnerability, helplessness. It's all those triggers. It's all of those very primal. None of the things that you have talked about today should have happened to you.
Thank you. There's an element though of like,
but they did, and you're still here. But that doesn't mean that you're not feeling it.
Right. I've gone through a lot of therapy, but I think there are things that were like inside of me that were kind of like things I didn't realize that I was still struggling with that this brought up. So for example, like my mom, when I was little, it was really weird. I'm just going to use the word, she was really abusive, like mentally, physically, just
she was
very,
a child.
Literally when she had me.
Yeah. There were no adults in the relationship.
No. Often I was made to be the adult. I had to be.
I know that feeling.
Sorry, you do. Where were you in the lineup of kids?
I was the fifth of six, but I was I have no problems compared to you. I have no problems compared to you. But also, and this sounds like something that you've endured, you can't be your own parent when you're 10.
Yeah.
And what you end up doing is you create an operating system that eventually will cripple you.
Yeah.
And I would be in school at 10, 11, 12 years old and have panic attacks randomly.
Yeah.
And I'll shut up after this, but it's just it's an interesting way to look at it. Years later, when I was off and successful, my mother said to me, "We're so proud of how successful you are. When you were a kid, every year the school would call us and tell us that you needed to talk to somebody, that you were having emotional problems, and that you needed to see somebody. And we just said, no, we knew you'd grow out of it."
You're like, no, I coped.
Yeah, so I was like, oh
my God.
And it was one of those things like, I know that you don't realize this, but you actually made it worse.
Yeah.
But they don't know.
Yeah.
These are people, your mother is an extreme example. Their first mission is to the care and feeding of their addiction, and everything else comes second. I know when I ask for money on this show, we have a Patreon on the show, and I justify it to myself by saying, well, for $5, I give you a show every month to get 2.5 hours of entertainment. And it's also not mandatory. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And then I have a show that I do on YouTube that we have a Kickstarter for. And the premise is that you pay half the budget and we pay half the budget, and you get a show to watch. And then, so I understand your trepidation in posting the GoFundMe, going like,
I'm not offering anything.
To your mind, you're not offering anything. To your mind, you're saying like, this is all about me. This is not about you. I need some help. What you don't factor into is that people donate and they feel good about themselves. They feel like the world is, that there's goodness in the world and they're a part of it. And it's a very positive thing. So what was the decision to do it? What specifically are you doing it for? And what is the goal? Let's get into the nitty gritty of that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'm kidding.
Yeah. See you later. Great talking with you. For me, I know we met a while ago, but I haven't talked to you since then. But so you're not aware, but my friends and my people online that follow me had no idea that I had a heart attack and didn't know, other than me initially posting that I got in a car accident, didn't know the details.
Now, did you have a heart attack as a result of things that were going on from the accident, or stress from the accident, or totally unrelated? Because you seem somewhat young to have had a heart attack.
So
unless you take really good care of yourself and you're actually in your early 70s.
No. I'm still trying to figure out why I had a heart attack. It happened, I think, separate from the car accident. I mean, it was almost a year later. I mean, I was going through a lot of stress. So
your system is under such Herculean strain. Did you know you were having a heart attack? What does it feel like?
No, because something was wrong, but going back to me gaslighting my experience, I was like, oh, I'm probably having a panic attack. Mm-hmm.
It's common.
Usually people think that they're having a heart attack, but they're having a panic attack is what I've heard. But I was literally like, I'm sitting right where I'm at now. I was on my computer and I started experiencing the symptoms, and it wasn't like a movie where it's like clutch your chest, fall to the ground. It was painful. I couldn't breathe. I was getting lightheaded. My heart was freaking out. I didn't have maybe I did. I didn't notice it, but I didn't feel like my arm was doing anything particular. But I lose sensation in my arm because of the accident all the time. So maybe it was, and I don't know. But the biggest thing I remember was just like pinching in my heart. And I went to the urgent care thinking that I was just going to be told I had a panic attack. But the symptoms were freaking me out. They were so bad that I was like, I should probably go to the doctor. And when I went into the room, I'm this young, and they think that I'm probably having a panic attack. So they're not really taking it really seriously, but they still have to.
Or that you're overdosing. Because
that's the next thing I was going to say.
Because I had that happen once. Not overdosing, went to the hospital because I hadn't slept in 11 days. So I went to Cedars and they were like, okay, what are you on? I'm like, nothing. And they went, sure, blood, urine. And then they come in an hour later, finding no drugs in your stream. And they're like, wait a minute, how long have you been awake? And then a bunch of different doctors come in.
Yeah, that's interesting you say the sleep thing because, did you have a heart attack or did you have a heart issue or something?
No, I was crazy and finally just figured my brain had broken and my body couldn't sleep anymore. I've since been told that I probably slept and don't remember it, that it's physiologically difficult to go that wrong. It's not impossible, but it's rare. But I literally just like, there's... you're too tired to do anything, but if you lie down, you have a panic attack. Like if I lie down in the bed, my heart is hammering. And so finally
I
went to the
feel
hospital
that.
and they, yeah, same thing. What'd you take? How much Coke? What pills?
Yeah.
No, nothing.
So yeah, when I went
Just
there,
crazy.
crazy is a powerful thing.
Mhm.
Makes stuff happen.
Yeah.
Don't deny it.
that's the
I'm really
the
competitive. I
tagline of
wanna
World
prove
War
you
II.
wrong.
That's the tagline of World War II. Crazy makes stuff happen. Germany, 1943.
Also, there was a lot of meth. So yeah, when I went into the urgent care, they did an EKG, and which is where they hook you up to, for anyone who doesn't know, like they put all the things on you and read your heart.
Electrocardiogram.
And yeah. And the girl who was operating the thing, like looked at it, and I saw her face, which isn't comforting to see someone go like, and then leave the room.
Yeah.
And then
It's like when the pilot comes out of the cockpit in tears. It's like, wait a minute.
Just keep composure, please. And then she comes back in and she's like, I think I did that wrong, which comforted me briefly. And then she's like, I think I did that wrong. Let's do that again. Runs the test again. Same face, leaves the room, comes back, says, let's do this again one more time.
Oh, God.
Same thing, face, leaves the room. Doctor bursts into the room, literally says, what kind of drugs have you used? And I've mentioned earlier that I have addiction in my family. So literally have never tried anything other than like, I've smoked a joint, like not even a whole one, but like a couple times when it was passed around. And I've tried edible gummies to help me sleep after the accident. That's it. Literally.
Me, nothing.
Even weed. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
It's if you grow up with addicts, that's why I barely even tried it, because I don't want to be addicted to anything. I've seen how that goes, but
the only thing I'm actively addicted to now is murder.
But yeah, the doctor came in and he's very convinced that I must be doing some sort of drugs. And I'm like, absolutely not. He's like, this is your health. You're not going to get in trouble. What are you on? Have you done anything? Or do you have a history of doing like cocaine or anything? And I'm like, no, I've never done a hard drug in my life. And he's like, okay, well then you're having a heart attack. I'm like, couldn't we have just like told me that and got me going before like we talk about the like, how'd you get here type of thing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I definitely dissociated at that point, because it was something where it was like, I couldn't believe that it was happening. They printed out like my EKG results and like whatever, because when you get to the ER, there's tons of other people there who are having medical emergencies, so you have to get in line still. But thankfully, because I was having a heart attack, they pushed me to the front.
Right.
But there were so many people already there, like I was being treated in like a closet behind the receiving.
We went through that. We went through that 2 weeks ago. We were in the ER for 12 hours, and the room my wife ended up in was also a storage closet.
Literally?
Mm-hmm. With a bed in it and machines.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they shoved a bed in there too for me. Yeah. But yeah, it's a pretty, that in itself is traumatizing, but they
even the people that are paid to take care of you aren't taking care of you.
Yeah, it was rough. I get there and they kind of were like, no, they must have done the EKG wrong. And then they told me to go sit in the waiting room and wait. And I started passing out. They're like, okay, maybe she does need help. You're too young to have a heart attack. They start doing blood tests, like a lot of blood tests, because apparently there's like a protein or something that like signals or measures the heart attack. And so I was in the hospital for a while, and it was just really painful, really uncomfortable, really scary.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And then pretty much once you're stabilized, they were like, okay, you're not dying. We have lots of people who need beds. You got to go. You need to make an appointment with your doctor, see a cardiologist. And that was that.
What prompted you to put up a GoFundMe, and what is it specifically aimed at accomplishing?
I didn't tell anyone really how bad it was. I had tried to do this alone for a year, just around a year after the car accident that I posted the GoFundMe. And I think what made me post it is that I watched my savings just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to, with her being uninsured and having no financial help with medical bills or anything, I couldn't afford treatment, but I was like trying to be positive and say like, I'm going to stretch and try to eat.
You're trying to, and when you say alone, it's important to understand, like, you're alone. Like, you do not have a family.
Yes.
You do not have a family to go to. All your friends are your peers. No one's sitting on a pile of money.
Exactly.
And and the person that did this to you is insolvent. And so you are the definition of like, no, you're on your own. Yeah. And at a certain point after the accident and then the heart attack, you finally just throw up your hands and say, I gotta turn around and go to the village and go, hey, I need some help.
Well, the thing is that I've learned with trauma and stress is like, I thought I was maintaining it. I mean, I was crying a lot and fucking brutally depressed, but I thought that I was able, it took the heart attack to be like, okay, this isn't working.
Right.
I need help. Because when I lost my health insurance after I lost my job, I got on the state health insurance and I begged my doctor, because they cover nothing really. I begged my doctor to get me an MRI to see where my neck was and my back was. And felt like things are getting worse. The pain's getting worse. I can't feel my extremities a lot of the time, or it feels like they're burning, or like there's bugs crawling on me. And I was like, this is getting worse. And when I got that MRI back, it confirmed what I thought, which is this is getting worse. There's like measurements in your neck of how things are off or herniated and all. And it's like astronomically worse. And I basically was told if I don't get treatment, I could start peeing myself because of the nerve damage. I could, in my spine, I could start this, I would have to have surgery. And it was just kind of this like bottom, just hit this bottom of like, I can't do this on my own. Any fear of sounding needy or like a charity case, or I just had to throw it out the window, because it was, if I didn't do this, I would have, like, if it was going to ruin an image or whatever someone would want to worry about with this, if I didn't get help, I wouldn't have an image to ruin. Yeah.
You don't worry about your bathing suit when you're drowning.
Exactly. I'd be wasting away in my bed, and I just couldn't. I mean, really though, that's what it came to, is like, I needed help. The money that people are donating and have donated already is just, I've already just this last week started treatment, and just having a physical therapist be like, oh, the thing you're feeling is this. Right. And this is what we can do to work on it. Right. The hope that comes from that.
Name it and claim it.
Like, that's a whole other hill I have to climb in terms of like recovering from this. And that's, like I was speaking to you earlier about being nauseous this morning because of stuff getting moved around and how it messes with my head. But just, I will happily take that, because it's like, I know that I'm working on it and this is possible to like work through and start healing from. But yeah, in terms of like what made me post it is just reaching a rock bottom of I can't do this alone anymore.
And you can't work. Like, you want to work. You want to do what you do. And it's hard to do that when you're in pain 24/7.
I tried to do, like, months and months after the accident, I tried to do a couple shows and I was wrecked the next day. I tried to pretend that I wasn't hurting, but I didn't want it to affect how I was moving on stage. So I tried to move similar to what I would if I was delivering a joke. And I remember I did Supernova, which is a round stage. There's people sitting all around you. But you reach there's like a pendulum where you get like, you baby yourself and you take care of yourself, but then you also get so fucking mad and stubborn. And you're like, no, I want to do the things that I used to do. Right. I want to go and do a show. I'm brutally depressed. What am I doing here? Like, the whole reason I'm here is to try to like do stand-up comedy, and it makes me happy. And I get to see my friends and, and it's like, you lose your identity. Like, pain is one thing, but the numbness that I experience and the burning sensations in my extremities, you can't ignore it.
No.
And it's just constantly, it's like any mental trick or any positivity, like anything you're trying to do, it's just like there's something constantly there, like picking at it. And it's really hard to move forward. And to answer your question, I literally, I can't keep living like this. This is no quality of life. Yeah, it was just, I lost everything. And It became like it wasn't a choice at all anymore. Like I had to say something and I had to tell people that I needed help because I needed to get treatment, I needed to see doctors. And it was just like, I tried to do it on my own for a year and it wasn't working.
There's nothing wrong with asking for help, especially in a situation where the majority of people in your situation, they have a safety net.
Couch to go crash on, even if their parents aren't.
Parents, aunts, you're out there on your own in space. And, you know, there's no shame in self-preservation. Tenacity and not wanting to post a GoFundMe. I'm glad you did. And I think it's really important. What is the goal that you have? What is your fundraising goal?
This might sound dramatic, but it's literally going to save my life. Like I can't continue living in this much pain if I don't get treatment, if I don't see a physical therapist and see doctors and go to all the prescribed treatments that they've told me I need to do for the next 6 months. I'm going to need neck surgery. I've already just lived like this for a year and I can't anymore. That's, so everything helps. I have, already made, $35,000, which blows my mind. Just the kindness of people has just blown my mind. I sat down. It was really hard to, number just sounds so big to me. And the number I need is, $59,000 is what I'm looking to raise.
So you need $24,000 to meet your fundraising goal, and that will get you the treatment and the therapies that you need to hopefully avoid having neck surgery.
Yeah, there's also a lot of medical bills I've incurred over the last year and a half, as you can imagine.
Can't even imagine.
So I really was like careful to sit down and find a number that, you know, adding up what all the treatments cost, what the doctor's appointments cost. And, you know, being that I lost my health insurance because I lost my job because I couldn't work because of the injuries. I just have state health insurance, but they don't cover anything. So all of this is out of pocket. So I'm going to be paying that pocket price for all these treatments.
And that's 5 times as much as when you're insured.
No,
it's there, but for the grace of God, go anyone. I mean, what happened to you, the scary thing is what happened to you could happen to anyone.
Right.
You were not drunk. You were not, you were just sitting at a light waiting for it to change. Where can people find the GoFundMe?
If you go to my Instagram, it's Jackie Brown. So it's ITSJACQUIEBROWN. That's my Instagram handle. I think the GoFundMe is like GoFundMe.com, help Jackie recover or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I have pictures there. I have more information. If you go to my GoFundMe, I've listed in detail more of the extent of my injuries, what I'm experiencing, if you want more information. But yeah, I spent a year kind of denying myself, help and denying what it would take to get through this. And I've been told this is what I need to do. These are the treatments that I need to get for the next 6 months. So it'll help me get those treatments, help take care of medical bills, and also help cover rent and just day-to-day expenses, bills while I take care of treatment, because I'm looking at like a full week every week of different doctor's appointments and everything.
Right. It's hard to work when you're... Right now, your full-time job is getting yourself healthy.
Right. And I haven't, hopefully, because I am a nanny for my day job, I'm not cleared to work right now because of my injuries. And so I'm hoping that I can get back to work, can get to doing stand-up, and I can have, as simple as it is, just a purpose in life again, other than just wasting away, like in pain. And it's just, I've already been floored by how many people have reached out and how many people have donated. And it just like, I feel like I've cried so much. Sorry, but it's just like,
believe me, I have seen women cry.
You make them cry?
Oh, I've seen it. Well, I will say, if anyone is a fan of this podcast, if you like this podcast, I would ask you to do me a favor and please visit It's Jackie Brown on Instagram or the GoFundMe address that I will post right here. Go to Instagram at It's Jackie Brown, ITSJACQUIEBROWN, or visit the banner link on the main page at danagould.com. The thing we never got to talk about that I do want to talk about in the future, I do want to talk about the journey from beauty pageants to stand-up, because it is, I'll say this, I know you and I know what you look like. And then I saw you in the pageant, and it doesn't even look like you.
Me.
It doesn't look like you at all.
It's so funny, isn't it?
And it looks like, and to me, it's like you're playing a character.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I definitely want to get into that, because I find it really fascinating. But
I'd love to come back. It's been really nice talking with you, and thank you so much. I know we've done a show together before. We really didn't know each other, and so for you even to give me this platform too means a lot to me. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I imagine that you just have to let go of, and I don't know how, of what that person did to you.
Yeah, that's a whole other Pandora's box of just anger. Because what happened was, after the drunk driver hit me, she got arrested. Definitively, you get a letter in the mail from insurance that says a percentage of fault that you have. I was 0% at fault, but she totaled my car. I get a lawyer, and we don't hear from her. And we don't know at that time that she doesn't have insurance. And so, I'm thinking, I can't focus past day to day, moment to moment pain. So it took even months for me to even be able to be like, okay, so what's the plan? There was a point where I was in too much pain to even go to physical therapy.
Right.
They were like, we can't treat you yet because you just got arrested. But then once my lawyer had to hire a private investigator to try to see, she wasn't responding to insurance, nothing. But when we found out, he made this phone call to me and my lawyer and was just like, there's nothing we can do. And I was like, what do you mean there's nothing we can do? I was like, can't we sue her? He's like, she's 30, probably 9 now. She lives at home with her parents. She's reporting no income. There's nothing we can do. We can go through I think it's called discovery or something, where you can make her say what's in her bank account, and you can challenge that too. But then that's okay, do I want to go deeper into debt, into lawyer fees, and then find that, a matter of fact, she is actually a loser? No, I believed her. It feels mean to say, but it's just it was just a hard lesson. I didn't think in America it was a reality that you could be leaving your fucking day job where you work your ass off and get hit by a drunk driver, and that there's nothing that can be done. And there's no system to protect you.
And the person that does it basically walks. Yeah.
If you don't have assets, you can get away with anything. Really, what are they going to do? And then you have to
Did she not even go to jail?
She did go to jail, but I don't really have, I'm not privy to what her criminal proceedings are. But I mean, I watched her get arrested, and I talked to the cops and they told me she got arrested. I mean, I don't know if LA City is getting their 10K or whatever it is for DUI.
She get out later that day. And
so, I mean, but what I was faced with was generally being told, hey, your needs don't matter. At least it felt like that to me, where it was no, there's nothing could be done. This happens all the time. And then to couple onto that, or to add on to that, because I had uninsured motorist. If there's any learning or lesson, a quick lesson out of this, it's up your uninsured motorist insurance, but it's expensive. It's I've never been in an accident. I have 0 tickets, or before this, I had 0 tickets on my record, and my car insurance was still $200 a month.
Right.
And it's it's just expensive in LA. So that was a big expense for me. And even that only got me $15K uninsured motorist. But that's just easily one hospital bill.
Yeah, that's nothing.
So it's
that's nothing.
It's nothing.
Yeah. And
it's given me so much, not that I looked down upon homeless people before, because I certainly had my heart went out to them, but I'm this can happen so quick to somebody.
Yeah.
If I didn't have savings, because I grew up the way I did, and I was fucking I've been alone for a long time, and I was terrified about falling on hardship financially. So I saved as much as I could. If I didn't have that, I don't know what I would have done. I don't have family. I don't have anywhere to go. And it's my situation could have been, it's bad, but it could have been way worse. I could be homeless right now. And it's just like you lose your job because you can't work because you're injured.
Right.
And then you lose your health insurance through your job, or you lose your income that's paying for your health insurance. And then all of a sudden you can't heal. So then you can't work. Or I was even like, am I going to have to like just fuck up my back more and lie to my employer and say I have injury so I can get a job? And it's just like, I didn't like thinking about that because I don't even know if that'd even be possible. But this is pre-heart attack, obviously.
Right.
But it just makes me have so much empathy toward people who have medical hardships and how quickly it could spiral out of control and you can on the streets. It's just that easy.
Yeah, it is.
To get on a soapbox for a second, it shouldn't be that way.
No, and people like to blame people that have fallen on hard times. Like, well, you know, they're a heroin addict. Don't do heroin. Yeah. Like, you did nothing wrong. You had insurance. You had a job. You were, wearing your seatbelt at a red light, and
just didn't even see it coming. I didn't even see it coming.
Plowed into you. Yeah,
but you'd be surprised because I had some friends with some big followings share my story, share my GoFundMe, which had a little blurb about what happened. And if you click in, you can read more. I went through his comments because people were tagging me saying really kind things. So I was looking through his comments and just like moved by so many massive amounts of people who are saying wonderful things. But every once in a while, you see someone who I think actually believes what they're saying, which is this woman wrote, "I'm so sick of people crying and whining, asking for help. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps." Like, just that whole narrative. And old me probably would have been just like, not angry, but like, what the heck? Why is she is, and like sad, or like, oh my God, do I seem that way? But then like through this, I'm like, there's clearly some trauma here.
Yeah.
That she has around asking for help, and who knows what that may be, but you do get some reactions like, and I think there's a population of the country who feel that way, even with a situation so clearly blameless like this one. I mean, there's so many life lessons that are packed into this that I'm still trying to figure out. But I used to value that I thought I wasn't an angry person because historically I just never got angry. I realize now that it was me denying my needs in a different form and just being a people pleaser and just going with the flow, not wanting to upset anybody.
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What kind of music do you like?
Metal. How did you know?
Because
it's an angry music.
I listen to old punk.
Yeah.
Cramps, whatever.
Yeah. Pixies,
just Elvis, stuff that I grew up with.
Yeah.
Because that's where I put it.
Yeah.
And all of those people, I know a lot of those people now, and special effects guys that work in horror, which is my other world. They're all the nicest guys in the world because they get it out. You want to deal with a nice, even-keeled guy who's like really cool to get along with, friendly, warm, Stephen King.
He gets it out.
Want to hang out with a psychopath? A stockbroker.
Anyone I've learned in life, anyone who's overwhelmingly like, anyone who's like, I'm really nice, I'm a good guy, I like to do these things that are all vanilla, like whatever things, like those guys end up being the most psychotic.
Well, if you want to find an asshole, the first sign of somebody who's not a nice guy is they tell you they're a nice guy.
Yeah.
It's
like someone being like, my best quality is my humility.
Right. That's perfect.
This experience has taught me about healthy anger. And because I think what I've learned in therapy is too, that when I would deny myself emotions or anger or suppress my needs, that takes you to a very like frozen dissociative place. And that's inaction. And that anger can actually, like, obviously healthy anger where you're not hurting yourself or others is an actionable thing. It's something where you're fighting a little bit. You're reacting to something you're acknowledging that something's not right with you, that you're upset about something, and that's okay. And having someone do this to me really helped me demonstrate how to process healthy anger and being okay with having healthy anger. So there's a lot of silver linings, I will say, that I can't fully appreciate yet, just because I look like I'm feeling better and stuff mentally, but I'm still really depressed from all of this.
Of course.
And I put on makeup today for the first time in a long time. You
and me both.
So thank you for doing that for me. It's been a process, and I'm sure that there's so many more lessons that'll come out of it. But it's been a rough journey for sure.
One more time, go to Instagram at It's Jackie Brown, ITSJACQUIEBROWN, or visit the banner link on the main page at danagould.com. Thanks.
This is Orson Welles reminding you that grinning, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch. And if your doorbell rings and there's no one there, that's no Martian. That's the Dana Gould Hour podcast.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Here was the problem. There was no way to make the film in any way that didn't look like a crass, cynical money grab. But the studio insisted it be made. Come hell or high water, there was going to be a Jaws 2. Now, of course, the entire story started in the mind of Peter Benchley. Peter Benchley came from a long line of distinguished writers. His father was novelist Nathaniel Benchley, and his grandfather was the Algonquin Round Table's Robert Benchley. Peter Benchley was working as a journalist when he encountered a fisherman named Frank Mundus, who plied his trade in the waters off Montauk, Long Island. Among the many stories Mundus related to Benchley was the true tale of when he killed a 4,500-pound great white shark with a harpoon. Benchley began wondering what would happen if a shark like that showed up in the waters of a summer resort community and, in Benchley's words, didn't go away. The novel, which received its title, Jaws, at the very last minute, when neither Benchley nor his publisher could think of anything better, was published in hardcover in February of 1974. Benchley didn't have high hopes for the book, saying, "I knew that Jaws couldn't possibly be successful. It was a first novel, and nobody reads first novels, and it was a first novel about a fish, so who cares?" Well, somebody cared. Benchley's book was optioned for a movie adaptation before it was even published. Producer David Brown was well plugged into the New York literary scene. His wife was Cosmopolitan magazine editor Helen Gurley Brown. David Brown read the book in galley form, liked it, and gave it to his partner, Richard Zanuck. And Jaws soon became a film property at Zanuck Brown Productions. Zanuck Brown had just come off a big hit, The Sting, and a smaller, not very successful, but very well-received Goldie Hawn vehicle called the Sugarland Express. The Sugarland Express was the first theatrical feature of a young TV director named Steven Spielberg. Now everyone knows what happens next. The unpredictability of shooting on the open ocean and a constantly malfunctioning mechanical shark resulted in Jaws going crazily over budget, crazily over schedule. At a certain point, Spielberg awoke every morning on Martha's Vineyard convinced that that day would be his last on the movie. That today would be the day that Universal Studios would finally lose its patience and pull the plug. If not on the whole movie, then certainly on its director. But that day never came. Released in the summer of 1975, by August, Jaws had become the first film in history to gross over $100 million. This was on a final budget of around $9 million. And I can tell you, as a 12-year-old kid in the summer of 1975, Jaws was all anyone talked about. It was around that time, late summer of 1975, that the producers, Richard Zanuck and David Brown, were summoned into the offices of Universal Studios' head of production, Sid Sheinberg. It was Sheinberg who had discovered and nurtured the career of Jaws' young director, Steven Spielberg. Spielberg thanked Sheinberg by casting his wife, actress Lorraine Gary, in the role of Ellen Brody. Roy Scheider's wife in the film. This didn't go down well with producer Richard Zanuck, who was hoping that his wife, actress Linda Harrison, would play Ellen Brody. But Sid Sheinberg was the head of the studio, and the head of the studio gets the final say, so Lorraine Gary it was. That said, Sid Sheinberg knew that Richard Zanuck still had to go home to his wife at the end of the day. As it just so happened, Universal was making another big sequel at the time, Airport 75. So Sid Sheinberg called the producer of Airport 75, Jennings Lang, and said, "Jennings, you have an extra passenger on that plane. So if you watch Airport 75, Linda Harrison is indeed on board. She's easily recognizable. Linda Harrison also played Nova in the original Planet of the Apes. That film was made at 20th Century Fox when, hey, guess who? Richard Zanuck was the head of the studio. Here's another fun fact. Jennings Lang once tried to shoot the guy who was having an affair with his wife in the balls. He missed, hitting him in the thigh. That guy's name? Walter Wanger. You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, it's August of 1975 and Jaws is the biggest hit in cinema history. So Sheinberg calls Zanuck and Brown into his office and asks, matter-of-factly, when, not if, they are starting work on the sequel. Zanuck and Brown were reluctant at first. Jaws was a singular story. It didn't really lend itself to expansion the way, say, The Godfather did. And they didn't see how a sequel could be done without it looking like anything other than an unseemly grab for money. This, of course, was back in the day when producers actually cared if something looked like an unseemly grab for money or not. In the end, they figured correctly that if they didn't produce Jaws 2, then somebody else would, so they might as well do it. They contacted Carl Gottlieb, who had done several drafts of the original Jaws, as well as overseeing all of the production rewrites. Carl Gottlieb lived with Steven Spielberg on the Vineyard during the filming of the movie and reworked and revised the script extensively. As I said earlier, they had to. The shark didn't work, and they were forced to work around it. So every night after shooting, the cast would meet up at Spielberg's house and improvise and work and brainstorm and figure out what they could shoot the next day and how they could shoot it. For example, the yellow barrels that are so ubiquitous in Jaws weren't in the original script. They were reportedly the idea of production designer Joe Alves as a way of keeping the shark alive without actually showing it. You can also see Gottlieb in Jaws. He plays the editor of Amity's newspaper. Carl Gottlieb has had an amazing career. He was a writer on the old Smothers Brothers show with Steve Martin. In fact, the two wrote the film The Jerk together. You can see Gottlieb in The Jerk as Iron Balls McGinty. Yes, Iron Balls McGinty wrote Jaws. Well, apparently, Zanuck and Brown had some balls themselves, because when they made the offer to Gottlieb, they lowballed him on the money, and Gottlieb passed. Next, they approached Howard Sackler, a playwright, author of The Great White Hope, who had done an early draft on the original Jaws. Spielberg himself says that it was Sackler who broke the back of the story and reshaped the novel into a cinematic structure. It was also Sackler who gave the motivation for Quint's hatred of sharks by having him be a survivor of the sinking of the SS Indianapolis. That was not in Benchley's book. Shaw's final speech in the film was written by screenwriter John Milius, who would go on to work on Apocalypse Now, with major revisions done by Gottlieb and actor Robert Shaw himself. So when Howard Sackler sat down with Zanuck and Brown, he presented them with an idea. A good one. Let's not do a sequel. Let's do a prequel. Let's tell the story of young Quint and the sinking of the SS Indianapolis. Suddenly, Zanuck and Brown were excited. Now, this was not a cynical cash grab. This was a real story. A real story that really happened and had a natural, organic connection to Jaws that could carry the Jaws brand, but would also stand on its own, as not just a movie, but a piece of genuine cinema, telling the story of some incredibly brave people. Together, Zanuck, Brown, and Howard Sackler went to meet with Sid Sheinberg. Sid Sheinberg said, Sheinberg, who had nothing but respect for Zanuck and Brown, and that they had just made his company several fortunes, said, and I quote, "That's a different shirt than what we want to wear." How's that for a classy pass? Universal Studios wanted as much of Jaws as they could feasibly repeat. They wanted Amity, they wanted Chief Brody, they wanted Hooper, they wanted a big shark, and they wanted ordinary people in danger. Preferably, in this case, young people, teens, because that's who Universal wanted lining up to see this movie. So Howard Sackler went to work creating The Further Adventures of the Delicious Swimmers of Amity. The next job was figuring out who would direct it. Steven Spielberg, who before Jaws opened, was set to direct a comedy about baseball's Negro Leagues, that's what they were called at the time, entitled Bingo Long's Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings. But when Jaws became Jaws, he dropped out and, using his newfound clout, made a movie he had always wanted to make. A movie about UFOs. Bingo Long's Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings would go on to be made by director John Badham, and it would star Richard Pryor, Billy D. Williams, and James Earl Jones. Spielberg's movie would end up being called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Howard Sackler recommended a director he knew named John Hancock, not the founding father. Hancock had won critical acclaim for another baseball film entitled Bang the Drum Slowly, starring a very young Robert De Niro. He had also directed a really good horror film, 1971's Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it. And after meeting with Zanuck and Brown, Hancock was now on board. Now that the hard part was over, the harder part could start. The stars. Universal wanted Hooper and Brody back. They'd like Quint back, but he was now shark poop. But Richard Dreyfuss was not available to play Hooper. He'd already signed on to star in Spielberg's Close Encounters. For a while, the producers thought about offering the role to another actor. You know, Hooper would be like Darren on Bewitched. But it didn't pan out. That left Chief Brody, Roy Scheider. When Roy Scheider first signed on to do Jaws in 1974, he was known primarily as a character actor, most notably for The French Connection and The 7-Ups. So to get a little more insurance on its dollar, Universal had Roy Scheider sign a 3-picture deal. This would lock him into any potential sequel. And Jaws made Roy Scheider a big, big star. He followed it up with a supporting role in Dustin Hoffman's Marathon Man, and then went on to his first film ode to Universal, William Friedkin's remake of Wages of Fear, entitled Sorcerer. His second film ode to Universal was the lead role of Mike in Michael Cimino's Vietnam War saga, The Deer Hunter. As the film neared production, Scheider objected to a change in the script. The rumor is that originally it was Scheider's character of Mike who remained in Vietnam playing Russian roulette for money, and when that was changed to Christopher Walken's character of Nick, Scheider didn't like it and dropped out of the movie, and the role of Mike then went to Robert De Niro. If that is true, my guess is Scheider eventually regretted the decision, but he now owed Universal Studios 2 movies. So they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Do Jaws 2, and we will pay you not only an enormous salary, but we will count it as 2 movies, freeing you of your obligation. Scheider took the bait, no pun intended, and ended up starring in Jaws 2 instead of The Deer Hunter. Yeah, I know. Now that the hard part was over, and the harder part had been buttoned up, it was time for the really hard part to start. As stated previously, John Hancock had directed Let's Scare Jessica to Death, a nifty little horror film that, although set in the modern day, had a dark, creepy, gothic vibe. Well, as it turns out, that is exactly what he had in mind for Jaws 2. His idea, in my opinion, was terrific. The events of the first film had decimated Amity, and Jaws 2 finds the town basically haunted. It's on life support. The tourists have abandoned the town, businesses have gone out of business, stores are boarded up, the weather is consistently dark and rainy and dismal. Bright, happy summer colors were removed from the film's palette. Bathing suits were black or gray. The sails on the sailing boats were black. Extras who showed up on the set wearing bright summer colors were sent home. I think this is a great idea because it's not just a remake of Jaws. It's essentially a ghost story set in the world of Jaws. Were it up to me, I would have pushed it even further, playing Brody as a haunted man suffering from severe PTSD who sees sharks everywhere, eventually going out to sea to confront another massive great white shark. And in the end, we would reveal that shark to have all been in Brody's mind. That way, it would be a completely believable story and not just, hey, another giant shark has attacked this same small town. Golly gee, what a weird coincidence. But nobody was asking me, not only because I was 14 at the time, and if they were asking me, they would have hated my idea anyway, because they hated what John Hancock was doing. And his idea wasn't nearly as whacked out as mine. Jaws 2 began shooting on Martha's Vineyard on June 6, 1977, and Universal had been looking at his footage with increasing concern. Eventually, Sheinberg, Zanuck, and Brown decided to do to John Hancock what they never did to Steven Spielberg, and that is pull the plug. John Hancock was fired as the film's director, and a new director was hired to change the film's tone and mood before it was too late. Universal Studios did not want a ghost story set in Amity. They wanted fun, fun, fun in the sun, 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 interrupted by a shark, 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 and blood, blood, blood. They did not want let's scare Amity to death. Now, Richard Zanuck could feel for Hancock. He had been fired once too, from a big job in a very public manner. From the mid to late 1960s, Richard Zanuck was the head of production at 20th Century Fox, helping bring the studio back from the brink of financial ruin. In 1969, he was very publicly forced out in a boardroom coup organized by his father. That's right, his own father, Darrell F. Zanuck, who gave him the job and then, later, yanked it away. Now, as a sidebar, I have told this story before, but I will tell it again very quickly. Richard Zanuck's firing at 20th Century Fox resulted in one of the strangest movie endings in all of show business. When Zanuck was the head of production at Fox, one of the films he greenlit and moved through production was, as I said, Planet of the Apes. And when Planet of the Apes was a hit, Zanuck, as head of the studio, brought in the producers and asked them when, not if, they would be starting the sequel. The producer of Planet of the Apes, Arthur P. Jacobs, had the same two problems that Richard Zanuck would later have as the producer of Jaws, when the head of that studio, Sid Sheinberg, asked him the same question. He didn't know how to make the movie without it looking like a cynical money grab, and the star of the movie didn't want to make the movie. In this case, it wasn't Roy Scheider, it was Charlton Heston. But both Roy Scheider and Charlton Heston eventually agreed because they knew how the business worked. It's show, business. Show and business. And there is a delicate balance. At least, there used to be. And so, at one point, during the production of what would come to be called Beneath the Planet of the Apes, reluctant star Charlton Heston suggested an ending to the movie. What if we blew up the Earth? This move, in his mind, would bring down the curtain on any future Planet of the Apes sequels. The film's director, Ted Post, hated the idea, as did head of the studio Richard Zanuck, thinking it was something of a downer. But then, in the middle of production, Richard Zanuck got fired by his dad. And so, on his way out the door, as a parting gift to his father, he said to the producers, "Hey, you know that blowing up the Earth idea that I hated? Yeah, I changed my mind. I love it now. Do it. Blow up the Earth. And have a nice day."
In one of the countless billions of galaxies in the universe lies a medium-sized star, and one of its satellites, a green and insignificant planet, is now dead.
Flash forward to Jaws 2. Sheinberg, Zanuck, and his partner David Brown all agreed that Jaws 2 seemed headed in the wrong direction and a change was needed. Richard Zanuck knew that getting fired publicly was embarrassing, so he handled it in a respectful and delicate manner. I'm kidding. The story has it that on June 26, 1977, 20 days after Jaws 2 started shooting, John Hancock was picked up at the production office and taken to the set. But instead of being driven to the set, he was driven to the airport. Once there, he saw his luggage, all packed up and waiting for him. He had not packed it that morning when he left for the production office. Once at the airport, he was informed that his services were no longer needed and he was to leave the island immediately. Thank you very much. And so as the plane took off and headed for New York, the production of Jaws 2 shut down, and the search for a new director began. Enter Rod Serling. Rod Serling? Yes, Rod Serling. And on this podcast, I usually see that all roads inevitably lead back to Rod Serling. In 1969, Rod Serling wrote and starred in a series on NBC called The Night Gallery. The director of the pilot episode of The Night Gallery was a very young, I think he was 21 years old, Steven Spielberg. In fact, Rod Serling was the first actor Steven Spielberg called action on as a member of the DGA. The production designer of The Night Gallery was a young guy named Joe Alves. Joe Alves and Steven Spielberg would later go on to work on Jaws. In fact, Joe Alves was tasked with designing the shark because Universal's special effects department was too busy with more important films in production at that time, like Airport 75 and The Hindenburg. Among the other directors who regularly showed up on The Night Gallery was a young French dude named Jeannot Swark. Joe Alves, who was on Jaws 2 as well, recommended Jeannot to Zanuck and Brown. And after a couple of meetings, Jeannot Swark came on board as the new director of Jaws 2 2.0. Jeannot Swark thought that the script for Jaws 2 needed a lot of work. And in the time-honored tradition of the cheap pay twice, Zanuck and Brown finally ponied up enough money and then some to get Carl Gottlieb behind a typewriter. While Carl wrote, the production moved to Florida. There would be a few scenes shot on Martha's Vineyard to establish the town of Amity, and Hancock's footage was all scrapped, as the DGA mandates. While the production relocated and Schwartz set himself to storyboarding new scenes and casting new actors, Carl Gottlieb set about writing a completely new story. Finally, by the end of July, he had finished the shootable draft. Some new actors had been cast, and Jaws 2 2.0 was finally up and running. Was everybody happy? Oh no! Actor Murray Hamilton, who played Mayor Vaughn in Jaws and Jaws 2, was accompanied on location by his son David. Interviewed in the book Jaws 2, The Making of a Hollywood Sequel by Louis Paisano and Michael Smith, which was where I got all of this info, David reported, "My most vivid memory during the filming of Jaws 2 was during the opening scene around the hotel pool. For some reason, Roy Scheider just had a meltdown and really, in my mind, inappropriately, began berating Jeannot Swark, calling him a TV director who didn't know what he was doing. I remember him walking back and forth like he was holding court, like he was Clarence Darrow, just berating and slamming this poor guy. And my dad never forgave him for that." Jeffrey Kramer, who played Deputy Hendricks in both films, said, "Sometimes I would come to the set early, and Roy would tell me that he had rewritten the scene and it wasn't necessary for me to be in it. So I'd look over to Jeannot and David Brown, and they would look back at me and cover their mouths as if they were trying to hold in their laughter. Then they would overrule Roy and put me back in the scene. I don't think Roy was happy. I know he didn't want to be there. I think they contractually made him. The joke was that people had to be restrained from urinating on his Mercedes. He would throw temper tantrums in front of 400 people. I mean, we were there for months, and I don't think he ever bought anybody a drink. They had to put cones around his car. And of course, there's this whole story of Jeannot and him rolling on the floor and choking each other. It was well documented. It was even in People magazine. David Brown used to say, "I've worked with all the greats, and Roy isn't one of them." On the first film, he was such a nice guy. He just didn't want to do this one, and he was very unhappy. Jaws 2 finished filming shortly before Christmas of 1977. It was released 6 months later, June 16th, 1978. The reviews were mostly negative, albeit restrained. I remember reading one at the time that stuck with me. It pointed out how, unlike in the original, they show the shark way too much. So much so that it's more annoying than scary, like a fly that gets in your house and won't get out of your face. But Jaws 2 made a bunch of money, coming in 5th at the box office that year behind Grease, Animal House, Superman the movie, and Every Which Way But Loose. And it did pave the way for the excellent, all-time classic film, Jaws 3D. I'm just kidding.
And now, on with the show.
It is a cloudless, sunny day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in sunny Southern California. It's February, but temperate. And I am joined by one of, if not the, preeminent, I guess you could say voice actor. Although you are an actor and a comedian, you do a large part of your brief is voice work for animation. One of the preeminent voice actors in this line of work is our announcer, Tom Kenny.
True.
The other one, the King Kong to his Godzilla, is our guest today, Canada's own Maurice Lamarche.
This is the sound of my voice. This is the sound of my voice.
This is the sound of my voice.
That is something,
and I never use it.
I fancy myself quite the impressionist. But then you hear somebody do it really, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, but I can't.
I'll stop. You're from Canada. Yes. You came to LA in the early 80s.
1980, exactly.
1980, exactly.
Right smack dab in the middle, June of 1980.
And you came to be a comedian.
I did. I did stand up in Canada back when Yuck Yucks, which was the premier and only comedy club of Canada for the longest time, was in the Church Street Community Center basement. I went up there in Toronto, and I went up there. Did when you're a mimic, when you're an impressionist, you've got that in your back pocket. It almost makes, and certainly did make me lazy in the sense that the material didn't have to be that great.
Well, they'll always applaud.
Yeah, they'll always applaud for the impression.
Right.
So, I mean, armed with that, I had a killer very first set ever.
Sure.
And I was made a regular immediately, and they quickly moved to their location. So I did the opening night of their premiere location, and yeah. But after 3 years, Howie Mandel had actually come down here in '79, and he was, we were on the phone a lot, and
also from Canada.
Also from Toronto. Mm-hmm. I mean, I started out with Howie Mandel and Jim Carrey. I was there for both their first nights because I was already
first nights doing stand-up.
First nights doing stand-up.
Wow.
So I remember Jim's first night when Jim, and I don't say this to do the pat on the back thing, but when Jim talks about his first night and kind of he thinks bombing, I thought he did just fine. And
sure.
He had some visual stuff that was great. When he did Bruce Dern, he became Bruce Dern.
Yeah, he was. People forget that Jim Carrey was a very traditional impressionist.
Yeah,
but in the sense of here's Bruce Dern, here's Clint Eastwood.
He did the turnaround thing.
But he would also physically transform.
He's one of the few people that when he turned around, somebody else turned back.
Yeah, the James Dean thing was
unbelievable, and
uncanny.
He thinks he had a bad first night, and he talks in interviews about how they came out afterwards because as he was walking away and told him, "You got to come back. You got to try it again." They is me. I was the guy who went after him because I could see he and his dad, and they were like just such a pair. His dad was his height, kind of lanky, and God, his dad was so great and so supportive. I mean, Jim was 15.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah. And Mr. Carey came out to every gig, and he seemed depressed, and I was like, part of me was like, all right, yeah, keep going, young impressionist. Yeah. Walk off into the sunset. This is my club. And another part of me was like, the poor kid, and he's got his dad. And I went after him. And I said, man, you've got to come back. That was actually a great set. But come back. Nobody has a killer first night. Right. Meanwhile, I had a killer first night.
And who were you? And now, so was your first set mostly impressions?
Always. That's all. I didn't develop a point of view until 3 weeks ago.
And did you... was it basically a now? Who did you do? And
I did these conceptual pieces, and one of them I actually did in a high school variety night. But
that's how I started.
I loved it's because it's such easy pickings.
Sure,
but it was a bit that my friends Steve Barton, Harry Van Bommel, and Stoney Cadell, I have to give them credit.
Wow,
conceptual bit about.
Did you go to high school in a Raymond Chandler novel?
And then Stoney Cadell walked in. I knew that something was up as soon as he looked at me across the room with a worried face and a bead of sweat on his upper lip. Anyway, they wrote this bit called, it was like what everybody starts somewhere, and almost all actors start out as waiters. What would these people be like as waiters? And I had, Carson as a waiter.
Sure.
Good evening and welcome to Chateau Maine, with a specialty house of smoked salmonella. And we just, we had, Peter Falk, I guess gets murdered while he's taking the order, all.
Yep. Paula Poundstone, who I know you worked with.
Yes.
I'm sure you crossed paths with.
Yes.
Used to have a really funny bit about like the president that I'll reference will show you how long ago this was. It was a Comedy Connection in Boston, and somebody did what if Reagan worked at the drive-thru at McDonald's and did the bit? And then Paula came on after him and went, what if Reagan, you worry too much. That won't happen. You're worrying way too much. But so it was just but it was traditional celebrity.
It was, it was, 10th grade.
Who'd you do?
It was, as I said, Johnny Carson, Peter Falk. Sir, that man in the back, he wants a knife. And somebody goes back and kills him. And, God, I can't remember who else was in the bit. It's been so long. But, I started with that and built from there. I did it, inspired by the great SCTV sketch.
Of course.
We wrote this Fantasy Island routine. And I used to, I've lost 28 pounns in the past year. But as a young comedian, I did. Well,
you were alive.
A diagnosis of type 2 diabetes will do that to you. I had a very athletic act because I did.
Sure.
I acted out Fantasy Island, and I must have done maybe 10 transitions between Mr. Rourke and Tattoo by jumping down onto my knees and back up.
Right.
My thighs and calves looked like tractors. I mean,
you can just do Rich Little would be this another Canadian.
Indeed.
Would be the stereotypical of like, you just come up with a very presentational thing. Here's this and here's this. But then once you expand it into a bigger bit, then it really does just become stand-up. Like Lenny Bruce would do impressions like the Defiant ones, but then it makes the change. Now it's a stand-up bit.
How was his Tony Curtis? Was it wonderful? Was it marvelous?
It was, the only joke I remember from the Defiant ones, he doesn't really do Tony Curtis at all. He goes, for a piano to play, you need the white keys and the dark keys.
Jeez.
That was the bit.
Could you get away with that joke?
Back then in 1961.
Yeah.
But then it becomes a stand-up bit that uses impressions, and it somehow gains more legitimacy.
Absolutely.
The person that really did it well was Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy's Delirious is full of just impressions, but he works them into bits. So he never was known as an impressionist.
And that's not something I in my 10 years as a stand-up comic, I was just getting to that. I was just, I've always said, I had about 3 more years until I was really good.
You're very critical of yourself as a stand-up comedian. And I know this from knowing you and from reading your stuff. Excessively so. I'm just going to tell you, excessively so.
But there's a sweet spot in stand-up, I think, where guys whose names we know forever get to, where they find their point of view and know what they want to say and know who they are. And Like Robin. If Robin had just done brilliant impressions, he might have made something of himself. Right. What am I talking about? Yeah. But Robin had, fantastic, wonderful. First, he had a fantastic character of his own. Wonderful. And everything's very fast and everything. The impressions didn't need to be spot on, like where you close your eyes and they think it's the guy. I needed a soupçon of that. Where I came from somewhere and talked about something rather than just doing these sort of demonstrational little, and what would this be like in this situation? Right. And
I get it.
And so if I'm critical, it's just because I feel, again, another impression. Missed it by that much.
Well, your success came before you didn't struggle enough. In your opinion, I think Eddie Murphy would say that about himself.
Yeah, I should have middled around the country in comedy clubs, but I was such a crowd pleaser that I was with the Morris office at the time. They just went, well, he's perfect. He's got he's got a solid 20. Let's stick him in front of the Temps and Tops. Right. Let's stick him in front of Rodney Dangerfield, who I toured with for a year and a half. Only on weekends, though. There was no like road with Rodney. It was like finish the week, which was great because I was starting to do voiceover. Go out. Only when we played Vegas and Atlantic City would I have to block out because he only wanted to tour on the weekends because he was the age I am now. He's 64 years old.
You are at that point the perfect opening act.
Yeah, and I didn't have to build that hour,
right?
Where I said something,
right?
Like I watch you as a stand-up, both on on the TikTok and other things and specials, and you've got a place you come from, and you've got something you want to say to people.
But that took a long time.
Yes,
yeah,
and that's what I should have stayed in it longer.
Yeah, but I understand that.
It was a combination of self-pity to a degree, but real sorrow and real grief. The way I lost my dad, and I talk about it not frequently, but enough that he was murdered by a man who used to be his best friend, and that's statistically. Apparently, that's much more common than you think.
In a hotel lobby in front of a crowd.
In front of a crowd, going down an escalator, and that's what It was not a smart crime. It was a crime of I don't know what, frustration, passion, anger, rage.
And how old are you at this point?
I'm 28. I'm the age my son is now.
Right.
Still malleable, and I just took it so hard. And I found a solution in drugs and alcohol for my feelings that I thought would kill me. And so I self-medicated. I have to say, my son, it's almost like I don't believe in curses. I don't believe that there's any real design to do anything. But my son lost a dear friend on his 22nd birthday. The singer Christina Grimmie was she was a winner on The Voice. We were very close to them, and they rehearsed for their European tour in our garage. She was murdered by a fan on June 10th, 2016, and he had just talked to her 2 hours before she went on to wish him a happy birthday. To his credit, he has never sought any refuge in a substance. He's processed his grief through music, through writing, and through therapy. And I've been grateful that I had experience in this area, that I was able to kind of at least be there as an ear to listen.
What an invaluable resource for him.
Not that it was designed that way, but you work with what you're given, and so...
So you're living in L.A. when that happens, and you're pretty established in your... What year is this?
It's 87 when my dad died.
So you're down here.
I'm down here.
And you're making a living.
Oh, yeah, as a comic and as a voiceover
actor. And by all intents and purposes, like, you're set. You're on the game of life. You're in the little car and you're going around collecting money at every
I'm
stop.
making a living doing my art. And then there's only from there degrees from that to private jet travel.
Right.
But if your head's above water in this business,
if you're making a living,
if you're paying the rent or the mortgage and you're making your car payment, doing the creative things that you love to do, you're a star, you're a winner, you're all of it. And I didn't see myself that way for the longest time.
Right. And a lot of that is Canadian.
Some of it's Canadian.
Just natural Canadian.
Some of it is that danger of comparing yourself to others. Your insides.
Compare and despair.
Compare and despair. Your insides with their outsides. And I had friends who were really killing it, and I wasn't killing it. And it's like, oh gosh, I'm not headlining, I'm only opening.
Yeah.
And that's such a trap.
Well, we can get into that and the confidence of deserved and undeserved, but I want to go back to what you were saying before. You're 28 years old. Things are going great. You have self-doubt, but you're moving forward in your career. You're doing great on paper. You look great.
Mm-hmm.
I say this about you because I have felt it myself. You're the only one that knows you're a phony.
But I don't know that, and I think everybody else knows.
Right.
To this day, like, you know, I told you before we started, it's like, I can't believe I'm here. You know, you're my new favorite podcast. And it's like, I was like, God, I wish Dana would ask me to be on the show. I don't have enough going on in my life.
But see,
I looked up our text chain just before we started like talking last week at SF Sketchfest.
Yeah.
And the last text you sent me was like, hey, I'm having Gray Delisle on. I'd love to have you on too and make it like a...
Yeah.
It was like, oh, he did ask me to be on.
But it was also like...
It was like years ago.
And again, but I was like super intimidated asking you.
Yeah, which shows I don't know anything. And shows you don't know anything. You don't need to be
But your
intimidated
name is,
asking me.
in that world, you know, you're the Parthenon. Like, oh, well, I remember doing the War of the Worlds episode of Simpsons Halloween. It was like, and it was like, well, we can try to get Maurice Lamarche. And then
little do they know, all they have to go is...
Yeah,
here, boy.
It was Alan.
Here, boy.
It was Alan.
Mo, we need Orson Welles. Yeah, I'll come over and do
Alan
Orson
Mike,
Welles.
Which was that was one of my favorite Halloween episodes. But you said when that happened to your father, you couldn't process it, and you started drinking and
doing lots of cocaine.
Cocaine. Yeah, well, 87, sure.
It's so weird. One of my favorite albums is Pink Floyd's The Wall, and
you hit it.
And that's where I would do the lines off of. No, Kinnison used to do the lines off of Belushi's book, or not the book about Belushi. Wired.
Yeah.
He'd draw a big line from Belushi's nose down to the corner of the book. I'd watch him do it over and over again.
I have to say, now you were very close with Sam Kinison.
Yes, I was.
Sam Kinison is someone who I saw in person do what I can only describe as an unfeasible amount of cocaine.
Yes.
I've never done cocaine.
No.
But being in comedy in the 80s.
You can't help but be in the room.
I have been around more than the Eagles roadie. I have seen pinpoint pupils like no one's business. But it is interesting that you were friends with Sam, because I think anybody who is friends with Sam that had your insecurities about your comedy is like, well, that's the last person in the world you want to hang out with. Because talk about a guy who came out with a point of view and knowing what he was doing.
And yet, Sam, I drafted on the fact that Sam thought I was great. Sam loved all my impressions.
Sure.
We would do impression offs, and he would tell me that I was brilliant. And so I was like, well, if Sam thinks I'm good, I guess I'm good. And then
he was Sam, I didn't know him that well. I'd met him a couple times, but I was a little boy doing stand up. But he was one of those things, like if you were on the bill, you're a comic, and it's like plumbers. We're all in the union.
Yeah.
You know, he was very egalitarian.
Well, I also met Sam when he was sleeping on the stage of the Westwood Comedy Store.
Oh, yeah, the Westwood Comedy Store.
He was managing the place,
right.
And he wore a white collared shirt and a black tie and black pants, like a waiter almost. Yeah. And he was the manager.
Yeah.
And I was like, I met him that way, and I knew him for a few months, and he was like, Maurice, your voices are so terrific. It's unbelievable. And I was like, thank you. It's so nice of you. Thank you. And he says, one night he said, I hope you'll stay, Maurice. I'm going on last, but I'm doing my set. I'd love it if you'd watch me. And I was like, well, sure, Sam. I'll stay and watch your little set. Sure, of course. And then he gets on stage and does, he does the marriage bit.
Yeah.
I was married for 2 fucking years.
Yeah.
And then he does this thing that he dropped from the act because I think it was too athletic and maybe he put on too much weight, called beast fuck. And he would just, I will beast fuck. And he would grab onto the tables that were like at push-up level.
Right.
At the store. They surrounded the stage. The stage
tables,
was about, it was literally around the stage. And then the stage was about, I would say, a foot below it. And so he could grab onto that and he would just fling his ass and his heels up into the air and come back down and fling them up and come down. And that would be beast. And I fell literally off my stool.
Oh, yeah. No,
I could not balance myself. And I was worried that I couldn't catch my breath. I was laughing so hard.
Those early, I was around for the pre-fame Kinison sets.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, where have you been? What?
Yeah. What is this?
Why are you just the manager here? Why aren't you a star? Years later, I got on the Young Comedian special. I was convinced because it was like a favor from my manager to Rodney's manager because my manager and she were close. And again, not feeling worthwhile. But I'm touring with Rodney, and we're on the bus coming back from, I think, Poughkeepsie. And he says, hey, Maurice, man, you know, I got one more slot left on the Young Comedians. I mean, you're set, and I got Bob Nelson, I got Bob Saget, Harry, you know, I got all a bunch of good guys. I got one more slot. Who should I put there? Who do you like? And I said, well, Rodney, I think Sam Kinison is ready. I think you got to book him. And he goes, yeah, man, I don't know. Sam can't cook in 5 minutes, you know. That's the only thing. I love Sam, don't get me wrong, but he alienates him as soon as he gets on stage, then spends 20 minutes trying to run him back, you know. And I was like, no, you know what? He's got a new bit, Rodney. At the top, he does a bit about asking for cigarettes at a 7-Eleven, has them eating out of the palm of his hand. I think you should take another look at it. He goes, I don't know, man. I said, tell you how much. I believe in Sam, Rodney. And my wife, who's then just my girlfriend, was at my side, and she gave me an elbow when I said this. I said, if I had to give up my spot for Sam to be on the show, I would. And Rodney did, like he did the real life version of that buggy-eyed thing that he did. He like, huh? Yeah. You know, and I was like, all right, man, I'll take a look, okay? A week later, my phone rings, and Kinison calls me and goes, Maurice, Rodney told me what you said. I'm doing the Young Comedian special, Maurice. We're both doing it. We're going to be in New York together, Maurice. Oh. And we went and did that 1985 Young Comedian special.
And that was a huge one.
Huge. And then, and this ties into my drug and alcohol story because I didn't just start doing drugs with my dad's death. I had
well, you're a comedian in the 80s.
In the 80s. Kinison drew me out my very first line of cocaine because we were going till 2 a.m. because something went wrong in the truck, back when they used to use a truck and not just like a small hard drive and an iPhone.
Was that at Dangerfields?
It was at Dangerfields. Right. Walter Miller was the director, and there was something had gone technically wrong, and so we had a
Was Rodney a cokehead?
You know, Rodney occasionally dabbled, I would say.
Probably started doing it in 1960.
Probably. Yeah, back the non-addictive kind that was on the cover of Time magazine.
Right, yeah.
And Rodney, you know, he had his demons.
He did cocaine before bell bottoms.
Yeah. I did cocaine off of bell bottoms. Okay? I used to smuggle it in bell bottoms. No, he was he had, but his ritual was before he went on, while the Rappin' Rodney video was playing, he came out, looked at himself in the mirror. There was a highball glass full of water, a tumbler with 2 fingers of scotch, neat, and a second highball glass of water. And as the last verse of the Rappin' Rodney song is playing, Rappin' Rodney.
I remember Rappin' Rodney.
He throws back the water, takes down the 2 fingers of scotch in one gulp, and then the second glass of water, and out he goes.
Wow.
And that was his ritual every single night. I had the theory that he had a terry cloth repellent force field around his body because every comedian has a story about Rodney's robe.
Yeah.
And my mother, God rest her soul, came down to Vegas to see the show, and we went back into Rodney's dressing room, and it was this plexiglass dining room table in the massive dressing room, and he's sitting there with the robe, and it's coming open and coming open and coming open.
Yeah.
Rodney.
This is
no, I mean, your kid's a nice kid.
This is the story.
Very talented boy. Well, thank you, Rodney. That's so sweet of you. And I'm going, Rodney, the robe is, yeah, okay, Maurice, whatever you say. Oh, listen, Norman, you do coke? You want any coke? You smoke a little pot? What do you think? You know, and it's going open and open. I'm, Mom, you know what? We actually have that order of crab and claws coming to my dressing room, so we better go. And I actually whisked her out of it before it came open all the way. But I've seen Rodney's equipment more times than the equipment to my swimming pool.
Sure. Somebody once said about Milton Berle. They had worked with Milton Berle, and they go, before you ask, yes. And then took a pause and then went, it looks like a beat.
Well, there's a legendary story at the Friars Club, which I actually was recruited by a comedian named Jackie Diamond.
Michael Rosenberg. We're going to go down a Jackie Diamond.
Are we?
Well, we both started out together in Boston. We were both 17 years old.
Okay. All right.
At the Ding Ho together.
Yeah, wow.
And we shared a girlfriend, not at the same time.
No, I know. That would be much too 1960s.
Yeah.
But who's
a lovely person.
Yeah.
Lives here and married, lovely.
Beautiful.
Still a friend.
I have not seen Jackie in quite a while.
Well, the last I knew, Michael Rosenberg, Jackie Diamond, two Jews walk into a bar, they buy it, pow, was living in Israel.
Okay.
And he's Orthodox now.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was the last I heard. I got that from Hiram Caston.
Well, if you hear it from
Michael
Hiram,
was 17 going on 48.
He was born old. He wore sharkskin suits, as you know, all the time.
Yep.
And at the time, he was part of the recruitment to get new blood into the Friars Club. So being a then cigar smoker, which I haven't touched the damn things in 15 years, thank God. But he said, it's a great place to smoke cigars. Half price. So I go in, and of course, the legendary, and I can't tell you how many times I tried to go to the bathroom at the same time as Burl just to see if it was true.
Sure.
But there's a legendary story that Forrest Tucker was also a bath troop. You know the story?
No, but I know that about.
Well, apparently so. They went into the bathroom once to ascertain and really, for the record. So Forrest Tucker pulls his out, and Burl reaches down to unzip his fly, and Burl's friend turns and says, "Milton, just take out enough to beat him."
It's such a. I think Lon Chaney Jr. also.
Apparently, Lon Chaney Jr. Yeah. There was more than one transformation.
Yeah, buy a drink for the Wolfman. But you talk about Dangerfield, and like I really miss that era of show business as much as they didn't like it. There was such a liberation to comedy in the late 60s, early 70s with the coming of age of the baby boom and comedians moving into coffee shops. But I do also love the you got to wear a suit, got to go out there. Like the thing that my heroes rebelled against.
Right.
I also think that might have been cool. Like Bobcat was telling me that he worked with Don Rickles a couple times, but on they did, I think, Tales of the Unexpected together or one of those. And the thing that Rickles couldn't get over, nothing about Bobcat fazed Rickles at all, except for the fact that he wore jeans on stage.
Yeah.
And then he goes, that he couldn't understand.
Right.
That he couldn't understand.
I was one of those comedians who I was drafting on the tails of those comedians, and I made sure always to wear a suit and tie when I was on stage, to the point where it became a liability. I remember one gig, I forgot shoes. I didn't bring my dress shoes.
Sure.
And so I had this suit, and luckily Robin, my wife, was with me, and she just said, "All right, stop with the suit. Here's what you're going to do, okay? Just open shirt, put on your jacket, push the sleeves up, jeans, and just wear sneakers."
Yeah.
And I was like,
do
you know what you're suggesting, woman?
That was the standard
I'll
comedian.
never get on the Ed Sullivan show dressed like that.
Yeah. And that was the standard comedian uniform.
Of course, but I was
for 20 years.
I was that far behind the times.
Sure. Well, Jackie Diamond, was a character of I say a guy was a kid named Michael Rosenberg, who's from Newton, Massachusetts.
Right.
We started out together, but he was in love with the Rat Pack and that era.
Yeah.
And he lived it, even off stage, like always dressed like slacks. And,
absolutely.
But his character was this, Joey Bishop kind of like, it was great. It was really funny. And he was really funny and a great walking encyclopedia of showbiz lore. And just a super, he was very, also here's a guy that was very specific in terms of what he wanted to do. And also super rich, which I think
I know he came from money.
Yeah, he didn't. I mean, when he was struggling,
not actual parents, just a $200 bills. Yeah.
Well, when he was struggling, he was living in a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom spread, probably 1-bedroom spread at the Hollywood Tower.
Yeah.
With a grand piano.
Beautiful Art Deco apartment.
Yeah, with a grand piano. And he had the HUD poster, and he had a grand piano in his apartment.
Yeah, to make extra money, he would import cigars from the land just off of.
Oh no, this is what he would do for extra money.
Yeah.
Now, and Mike, if you're listening, Mike, tell me I'm lying. Let's go out to dinner.
Okay.
We all go out to dinner. And then he goes, what, you just give me cash, I'll put on my credit card.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then one day it slipped because I don't know, my dad pays my credit card.
Yeah,
bills.
right. Okay.
And I'm like, come again? What?
Yeah.
So all those dinners
all those dinners, Dad couldn't take me out for dinner too?
This was before ATMs.
Right.
I was his ATM.
You were the ATM.
That's minor criminal. Great guy. Yeah.
I love Jackie. And yes, as you said, very specific and in love with that era. And I think part of what drew him to me was I was that suit and tie guy. So back to the Rodney thing, though, I have to give credit to my wife. So it's like, all right, I'll trust you. I'll go on. So I went on. I'm not saying I invented the pushed up sleeves, but Robin did.
But Robin did.
Robin did. But I went on, and there's a point at which, and this is, reminiscent of the times, I did Don Adams. I did Maxwell Smart.
Okay.
I always made sure to wear loafers so I could just slip my shoe.
And do the right.
Shoe phone, and then down, drop it down, sock,
Right.
just I also wore very sheer socks, so it would slip right back in. I've got a big frickin' sneaker on the floor,
Right.
and I'm trying to, and it won't, and I can't, and I go, fuck it. And I just kicked off the other shoe and did the rest of the set in my stocking feet. And it was the freest I'd ever felt. It was like my feet were connecting with the stage, and I was just walking around, and it was in the round. It was theater in the round. And it was like, oh my God, what have I been doing to myself with these rules? It's like Heath Ledger, you have all these rules and you think they'll save you. And it's like, I had this rule about being in a suit and tie. And from that day forward, I just was like, fuck, whatever I'm wearing, I'm going on stage. And so that's why I say like 3 more years, and I think I would have gotten to a place where.
Yeah. But your success interceded. Was it Animania? Like, what is the thing because I had a different, like, I kind of felt like I had run a course of like pilots and like was,
right.
Close to SNL, didn't get it. Close again, didn't get it. Acted in a sitcom, produced a show.
Sure.
I'd kind of done a little version of everything.
Right.
And then, but I wrote a pilot for myself.
Right.
And it got made. And what I realized, it didn't go to series, but it got made. And what I realized after was I really enjoyed the writing part the most. Yeah. And that happened to coincide with sort of the fading out of the comedy boom. It was sort of 95, 6. No, but 97, 98.
Right.
The 80s boom finally had kind of piddled out.
They were like Starbucks's,
Yeah. It was really piddled out.
Yeah.
And I was getting married. It was basically, do you want to have a regular job and be a grown-up? Like, yeah, I'll give that a shot.
Yeah.
And for a while.
Is that what you got staffed on Simpsons?
Yeah,
or?
basically. And it was just like, yeah, I'll be a grown-up for a while. Just like wake up in my house with my wife, get in the car, go to work, have a parking space and a business card and an office, and still be funny. And my friends are funny. And then I go home. But after about 7 or 8 years, I was like, I'm going to kill myself.
I never got to that point, first of all. There was times I fantasized about what would it be like to have an office, an actual place to go, Mm-hmm. But I remember people talking about you, man. I mean, people would say, wow, did you see what Dana Gould did? And
really?
And I announced
like
something. I don't know if it was Evening at the Improv or... Did you ever do Evening at the Improv?
About 40 times.
Okay. So I must have said, I know I said, Dana Gould.
Oh, funny.
And then we stopped, and the producer said, oh my God, you should have seen what Dana did. It was so hysterical. And we were laughing so hard we could barely carry on with the show. People talked about you in your stand-up.
This is like back in the 90s.
Back in the 90s. Yeah. And it was like...
It was hard to bottle.
Right. But you were a cause celeb and the guy doing the most interesting and funny things.
Yeah, I had a nice fun run, but it was hard to bottle.
Right.
Like you couldn't really do it on. It was one of those things. It was like, I'll use a weird analogy. The Who. Okay. One of my favorite bands.
Of course.
But to really get what the Who were, you have to see them live or hear a live album.
Okay.
Like,
which is funny because I fell in love with them over the Tommy album.
Right. But that's not really what the Who does.
That's not what they do.
Yeah. And that was the same thing. It was like the thing that I did best was going in a club after 3 or 4 very conventional comedians and turning the night around.
Yeah.
And like turning it inside out.
Awesome.
By doing other stuff. And the thing is that is what it is. Like, there's no way to make that anything other than what it is.
Right.
That's it. It was just like, it's sort of, you're...
And Suits are going, well, what do we do with that?
Yeah, what do we do with
them? What do we do with that?
It was very hard. The answer is nothing.
Right. Yeah. Well, they didn't know what to do with me in that regard either because I wasn't quite good looking enough to be a leading man. And I wasn't quite heavy enough because I only had an extra 20 pounds on me at the worst part of my stand-up career to be the fat guy.
Right.
And so they didn't quite know what to... And the neighbor who did impressions had been
speaking of
done.
Speaking of the fat guy, you're also... This is you're like you and Joe Alasky are both in town at the same time.
Yes.
Kind of shopping at the same store creatively.
Yes. And Joe... Joe was much
God rest
more a
his soul.
character, yes, and he was brilliant. But Joe was much more a character than I was. There also,
Right.
There was, again, I had not made a decision as to what version of me to
Right.
sell as an actor, as a.
And you really do have to do that. You have to have now everybody knows it, but it's like your brand. What's your brand?
But yeah.
What's your brand?
Am I the hapless guy? Am I the guy, the smartest guy in the room? Am I the guy that has the witty bon mot that always caps the scene? And they didn't know what the hell to do with me. Voiceover, we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Not that it needs to be talked about,
No,
because
it
that's
should
the
be.
beauty of it. It just kind of like it runs itself. It's like you can do anything, you can be anybody. And it's like the world's greatest rep theater company. I can do an episode of The Critic, which, and I feel like I'm the reboot king and Tress MacNeille is the reboot queen. I mean, we've got Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, Futurama's coming back, and the only thing we haven't managed to resurrect is The Critic.
That's because Al's still running The Simpsons and Mike's in New York.
Mike's in New York, and he does, who cares about the problems of a rich Jew?
Who cares about The Critic?
The Critic. And John.
Couldn't love the guy more.
And John, he'd love to do it live action, but I don't think he's. We did it as a cartoon. I'd play Joe Sherman again, but maybe as a live action show. And John also resists
John
the idea.
Lovitz,
John Lovitz. I should for your listeners who
for the kids
weren't around in the '90s to see this brilliant show. John, John resists the idea of doing like Sketchfest and doing a reunion panel, that type of thing, which is kind of how these shows get rebooted. We show the audience interest. We've done a Futurama reunion panel at SF Sketchfest since the last time it was canceled, and it's finally back. And I have to think that the attention that it gets, that we sell out the Marine Memorial Theater sometimes twice in the same Sketchfest, that people are paying attention to that.
Where does Billy live? Billy West.
Billy now lives in Simi. Yeah.
Okay, so he's here. He's not in New York.
Oh yeah, no, he's here. He's here.
Because I remember.
You remember Billy from Boston?
I remember Billy from WBCN, Mattress Michigas.
Okay.
In Boston.
Yeah. He and Eddie Gorodetsky started.
Eddie Gorodetsky.
Eddie.
Who's in Glass Onion?
Where?
He's in the beginning. He's the psychiatrist at the beginning of Glass Onion.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No.
How did I miss him?
Yeah, I know. But yeah, that's how I know all those guys.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, it's quite a crop out of Boston.
Yeah, that was a good batch.
Yeah,
it was a good batch.
You've seen, you're in it.
When Stand Up Stood Out?
When Stand Up Stood Out.
The back of my head is in it.
Yeah.
But I was there.
Fran, I met Fran Solomita because he was producing promos at NBC, and I was just tonight on an all-new Seinfeld.
Sure.
That's how we got
all that old Ernie Anderson's.
Yeah,
Ernie Anderson's old job.
I mean, I'll do any of that. I do promos. I do.
Well, Tom Kenny, our announcer, was telling me that before SpongeBob really went into the stratosphere, he was saying once that because that I do all this stuff, but the giant checks, like the big foam core checks that they deliver to your house in a van, is just for stuff doing like with real butter.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah. The guy who's the
savory syrup and real butter.
Real butter. I mean, the guy who was the voice of Butter, Michael Bell, calls his house the house that Margarine built.
Sure.
It's a great gig, and I have to say that when after I I didn't kind of leave stand-up. I made a vow that I was never going to step out on a stage and make people laugh again because, damn it, God, you took my father away, which is really, just immature, self-absorbed reaction to grief. But, I mean, it was just...
Well, I don't think anybody's going to punish you for having a...
No.
Maurice,
boy, did it
no one's going to punish you for having a bad reaction to your father's murder.
No, I know. Except me.
Yeah.
I'm the person who punished
because
I didn't...
You're a Canadian
you're not
comedian.
supposed to shake it off.
Because you're a Canadian comedian. It's a perfect storm of
course.
Yeah.
But, I did it politely. I did it politely, okay?
I was trying to explain to somebody the alchemic mixture of self-loathing and narcissism that makes up the comedian's mindset to be the piece of shit that the sun revolves around.
And I've done enough work on myself that I realize that there is no message from the universe to me. The universe has been here a long time. It's going on a long time after I go. But we all try to make meaning out of things. That's part of what we do as humans that the dog doesn't. And, and I thought it meant I'm supposed to keep my head down. Don't get too big for your britches. Don't let a bullet fly past you. Don't get too well known. Don't because things were just about to break for me. In fact, I was reading for a sitcom the day before my father was killed. No, sorry, I'll say a week. That I got so close to, and I just thought, well, that's it. Your ambitions were too high, whatever. I just said, keep your head down. And voiceover was, for me, a great way to just kind of, it fit too with this, sort of, I want to say that I'm a really outgoing introvert. I get that. I get that. Yeah.
I
get overstimulated when I'm out and about a bunch of people, but I really know how to amp up the energy and reach out and be in it, but all the while it's like receiving a series of small bee stings. And I really would prefer to just kind of be one-on-one, go out for lunch with one person, possibly two. I'm not that guy that's great at parties, but I can do it if I have to.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day what my life would be if I hadn't, I'm very plugged into the, I'm married and I have children, and it's like my day starts at 6, and I've already driven a kid to school and talking to my other getting my other daughter.
And you got a daughter in college now, right? Two in college. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, making sure that the vet down here gets her cat's files so she can take her cat to the vet up there. And there's all this morning, But if after I got divorced, if I hadn't met my wife, and my parents are older now, they live in Massachusetts, and once my kids got us kind of on their own, they don't need me minute to minute.
It's just you and a Jägermeister in the kitchen.
Right. Well, just like, what would I do?
You're not a drinker, though, are you?
I don't drink. But so I was like, but would I? And I was like, what would I do? Like, because I can see getting up, just watching Perry Mason. And
you're Dick Van Dyke in the comic,
and doing whatever I want to do, or just doing whatever I want to do. Right. But the fact is, when I think like, what would I do? The answer is you wouldn't, because I could have done that and I didn't.
Right.
Like I'm too social, and I know that I have to make myself be involved in the world.
Sure, the pandemic must have been then hell for you because. Without that contact.
My wife makes my wife makes fun of me because at the height of the pandemic, I was up 8 o'clock wearing a belt, shoes on, to-do list. The height of the pandemic,
and you let me guess, you were the one going out there to get the groceries.
I was getting groceries.
Stop at the pharmacy,
doing all that stuff.
That's
also I committed to doing like a pandemic minute. Like a bit every day on Instagram, and sometimes it would take 4 hours to get it right.
Right.
Rob Cohen and I created
fellow Canadian,
right down the street. We created Hanging with Dr. Z at the height of the pandemic.
Yes, you
did. And that's still an ongoing franchise.
Yes.
And I just adapted. Like, all right, I'm going to do it this way. And yeah, I think comedians have a desire to isolate, but as the old saying goes, when I'm alone, I'm in bad company.
Yes. My head is a bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was, unfortunately, I didn't give myself much in the way of creativity during that time. Although I did do one thing I'm rather proud of, which was I recreated a live action version of the Rosebud frozen peas commercial from The Critic. And, I shot it all on an iPhone, all by myself. My son's girlfriend, Bridget, edited it for me because I have no chops for that. But it was I shot for shot.
That's amazing.
The Rosebud frozen peas bit. But I didn't continue to churn. I called it Maurice Lamarche's Pajama Pants Theater.
Right.
And, but I don't have that thing where I've got to write, I'm very reactive. I just kind of do what comes to me, which is what voiceover is so beautiful for, because it's just like, oh, they want me to go do a thing over here. But during the pandemic,
And that kind of continued in
kind
the
of
pandemic,
stared at the wall.
But
And
didn't voiceover kind of keep going?
yes, it was one of the few things that I was able to, go into the closet that my son had repurposed as the sound booth, and we did the entire last season of Disenchantment, Matt Groening's third show,
Right.
from our home studios. And so, or no, season 4. And then season 5, we were starting to get back into actual studios. But I did all of that from home. And same with the beginning of the second season of the new Animaniacs.
Right.
So I was very...
And it was Animaniacs that sort of kicked your career into...
Yeah,
high
I
gear,
guess. I
wasn't
mean,
it?
Real Ghostbusters was 160 episodes, and getting to stand on the shoulders of Harold Ramis as Egon
Right.
was great. But I was really kind of a working guy. Tiny Toons came along, and I was like, wow, I'm working for Spielberg. And he actually autographed a little sketch of my character Dizzy Devil to me. But yeah, Animaniacs and The Brain really, from Pinky and the Brain, really kind of took me to the next level, because I was really delving into a character who had some complexity, and he was the same. He had experienced some growth in certain episodes, but there was so many notes to Brain. He had that sense of thwartedness that I certainly resonated to.
Sure. And did you... What was... To do basically Orson, was that your call? Or
Totally, because he was not based on Orson Welles.
Right.
The sketch of him was based on a writer named Tom Minton, who, if you look at a picture of Tom on Google him, folks. And do you have any folks? Yeah, you got folks
I do.
listening.
I have folks and peeps.
Folks and peeps. Peeps and folks. Google Tom Minton. You'll see he's the actual inspiration for The Brain.
Oh,
and
hilarious.
he's a brilliant guy and one of those fonts of knowledge, but he talks a mile a minute in a very low-pitched monotone. And when I saw that dour face, I saw Wells, and I thought, oh, they've created this character for me. In my hubris, that stand-up comedy hubris.
Sure.
So I just, became so, and it became Orson Welles, and then Andrea Romano, our director, said it's a little too low all the time. Can you put some peaks and valleys in it? So I borrowed a little Vincent Price. Mm-hmm. Just a bit of his sort of thing, and I melded them together, and he became The Brain. Yes.
Oh, wow.
So there's just a soupçon of Vincent Price.
There is. There's a little frosting of Vincent Price.
Speaking of frosting and speaking of Vincent Price and cooking, have you ever made anything that Vincent Price?
No.
There's a wonderful...
but I certainly
soundbite on the YouTube. Yeah, so do I. But there's on the YouTube, as the parents say, as the dads say. There's a clip of him, a full instruction on how to make a roast pork.
Amazing.
With prunes.
Amazing.
And prune haters will love it. I actually made it, and damn, did it turn out great. Perfect 60s comfort food. So look for Vincent Price roast pork, and it's really fun.
Did you ever meet him?
I never. He walked past me once. I was down on the set at Evening at the Improv, and on the night he recorded. So I was there, and he walked past me, and I didn't get to meet him.
I met him at UMass.
Wow.
When I was a freshman. He came and spoke to my acting class.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Was he a delight?
Yeah, great. And it was really interesting because even at the time, like some theater, everyone's, 18-year-old theater student. Nothing good's going to come out of that mouth. Nothing. And this one goes, how can you justify doing Shakespeare and then doing Hollywood Squares? I mean, don't you feel like you're just prostituting yourself?
Oh, my God.
And he just, I'm sure he does it all. He
probably gave a little.
Yeah, he didn't. And he said, I'll never get what he said. He goes, everything I do informs my art and is therefore a positive.
Excellent. What an excellent
answer. Just like,
yeah.
Shut up.
Shut up, 18-year-old know-it-all.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
But, I again, like he was, the one thing that you see, like when you watch those old Vincent Price things, is like, you know what he was doing? Working.
That's the thing. And again, I love voiceover for the pure honesty of the fact it's just take a job.
Yeah.
Get a job. Did you work? Did you work today? Did you rack up enough sessions to make your health insurance?
Yeah.
It's all just jobs. Anthony Hopkins has that attitude towards work. You just go down to the next thing. All right, well, we're going to pass on that picture. Go to the next thing.
Yeah,
I heard him say that.
Do you watch his little Instagram things?
Yes, I love.
They're amazing.
I love his stuff.
But because this is actually full circle, because he was talking about confidence.
Yes,
and he goes, if you don't have it, fake it.
Fake it. That's power. That's power. That's real power. I got to meet him. I did the Alan Thicke show in Vancouver. Not the one with Arsenio Hall. The Canadian one that all the comics went up to try out their Tonight Show set before they came back down to do the Tonight Show.
Alan Thicke.
Yeah, Alan Thicke. He was great. He was very mellow. He was almost like Garfield. But and I met Tony. He told me right away, call me Tony. He was promoting Elephant Man, and he
wow, so it was early.
Really early. Yeah. And he loved the voices. I mean, he was a voice man and still is a voice man. Yep. And we've kept in touch. And every now and again,
kidding me.
No. And so every now and again, I'll do a voice for him. I remember saying to him when Silence of the Lambs came out, I said to him, "Are you going to win the Oscar for that?" He goes, "Oh, have you seen the picture?" I said, "No, I just saw the trailer, and I know from the trailer you're going to win." He said, "That's very kind," and he did. And then I said, "You know what would be great, Tony, is if I'd love to do a bit where it's like, what if the other Tonys of show business were Lecter?" I said, "What if it was Tony Curtis? I'll help you catch him, Clarice." And he fell about with that. He thought that was hilarious. He's a wonderful sense of humor and a great mimic.
I used to do Gregory Peck auditioning to play multiple Megs. And it was like, Mr. Peck, this is a small role, and people are going to see you, and it's going to take them right out of the movie. So I'd like to try. Well, we just don't feel the... I can smell your cunt. Thank you, Mr. No, let me go again. I can smell your cunt. Thank you, Mr. Peck.
And Hopkins is at the session going, no, I think it actually could work too. Jonathan, let's try him. Let's try him out in the role.
I look at him as like, oh, that could have been me. Because he's not married. Does he just like live alone in a mansion? But he seems
I don't know his home situation.
Painfully sane.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
He really is.
I mean,
I haven't seen him in a few years, but, because he changes his number every 3 weeks. So he'll give me his number.
Oh, yeah?
And then, like, next time I try to call him, the number you've reached. So, I just have to count on being able to bump into him every now and again.
Sure.
I have a mutual friend get us together for lunch. Last time I went for lunch with him was at the Cuban restaurant, Versailles.
Yes.
And there was a Nobel laureate at the table, my friend Jim Miller. Wonderful old-time writer, used to write Ironside.
Not Jimmy Miller.
No, not Jimmy Miller, Dennis's brother. No, James Miller. And he used to write Ironside and all those great 70s shows.
Our world is so small.
Yes.
Yesterday.
Yes.
I was looking at, this is how small, I was looking at a Dr. Z Svengoolie promo that I shot.
Oh, wow.
Just because I love Svengoolie.
I love Svengoolie, too.
And it was him on the phone. And it's one of those things, I'm sure you've done this where people will say something that you said, and you're like, did I say that? I don't remember saying that. But we shot it a while ago, and it was Dr. Z. This is just yesterday. It's Dr. Z on the phone. I'm in all of the rig. And he goes, what I want to know is what was Raymond Burr thinking when he did Ironsides? Like, do you want to do a series? Yeah, I just don't want to stand up. Don't worry about it. We have. Oh, I'm sorry. They're here. Hello. And
I love it.
I just don't want to stand.
Yeah. I'm not standing. All right. Yeah, just the legs won't take it anymore. So if you can make up something where I'm sitting a lot, that would be great.
The Iron Duchess.
Oh my God! And I can't. But
well, there's also younger Perry Mason.
That's true.
Before he got too gravelly.
Yeah.
Paul
Kinnison used to do. Mark, my piss bag, Mark. That was his. His Ironside impression.
Do you remember Bob Sarlott?
No.
Bob Sarlott was a comedian in San Francisco, but he was like Comedy Store during your era.
Yeah.
One of Letterman's gang.
Okay.
Well, like, greatest guy in the world. So funny, so wonderful. And one of his jokes was, have you seen these new Perry Mason movies? I don't know what Raymond Burr's been up to lately. Sit-ups isn't too high on the list.
I love it. But just to get back to the Hopkins story, though, we're all at lunch, and Hopkins is sitting there and he's going, I just finished a Woody Allen movie. It was wonderful. I said, what's he like to work with? He's very easygoing. We went out the two, and I asked him, I wanted to ask him what the character should do, and he said, well, I definitely think that you should do whatever you like with it. It's unbelievable. He's cheating on his wife, whatever it was, the motivation of the character. But to hear Tony Hopkins Hopkins, do Woody Allen.
Oh,
at
he's
the
trying
table.
to-
that's me filtering because
Right,
my
'cause
Woody
you're
Allen is totally
not
different Woody
his,
Allen.
right, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
doing
right.
Anthony Hopkins doing Woody Allen, which really says something about me. If I
But
can just bring it back to myself for a second.
But that's most impressions. Like, I don't do Vincent Price. I do my friend Tom Sawyer doing Vincent Price.
That's interesting.
I don't,
With Vincent Price, I started.
I do your Orson Welles. I'm not doing Orson Welles. I'm doing you doing Orson
and
Welles.
I'm doing me listening to the outtakes because Phil Proctor,
Mrs. Goober's piece.
yeah, Phil Proctor from the Firesign Theater gave me that outtake tape on New Year's Eve of 1984.
Celebrities at their worst.
And celebrities at their worst came from the bootleg
That's what I mean.
tape.
It
came from the bootleg tape
Right.
that I then added to with William
Right.
Shatner and all that.
Who gave it to you?
Phil Proctor from Firesign Theater.
Bruce Campbell gave it to
And
me.
I listened to it backwards and forwards
Sure.
and backwards and forwards until I could eventually walk along going, now what is it you want in your depths of your ignorance? What is it you want? I'm smoking cigars in a 1984 Mitsubishi Starion, and I'm learning every nuance
I take direction
from one person.
Under
Protest. But from two, I don't sit still. Who the hell are you anyway?
you and your friend.
Your friend. Every July? No, you don't really mean every July. That's bad copy. It's in July. Of course it's every July. Too much directing around here. So, but and Vincent I got from just watching Mystery. I fell in love with Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes, and still to me, much as I love Benny Cumberbatch, I could call him that because I met him for 3 seconds. Much as I love what he did with the character, Jeremy Brett was so true to the literary Holmes. And so good evening and welcome to Mystery. Tonight, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
He was the
that was when we first saw it, and Vincent used to be that. So that's where I kind of took it. But I've done that. I've gone into like Rich Little's Johnny Carson and go, okay, what isn't he doing?
Right.
Let me capture something that Rich isn't doing with the character. And I decided it was
Not a happy guy.
Some of the nasality was not there, but I've always I'll have the hubris to say this. I've always felt Dana.
Oh yeah,
Dana, I'm sorry.
He would probably say that.
He'd probably say, yeah, I took it from Rich.
Well, yeah, and it's like and Dr. Evil is Mike doing
Mike's version of
Dana's Lorne.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's just
were
all,
close.
Yeah. It's all it's like on FM and AM. Carlin says when doing his Ed Sullivan impression, he says, and this is from 1971.
Right.
This is how old this
From
trope
Class
is.
Clown.
Yeah. Well, no, from before Class Clown. When in FM and AM.
Oh, AM and FM. Yes.
Because a lot of people do the John Biner Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
I do the
Will Jordan Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, no, it's just
what I know.
Yeah.
What I know right here on our stage.
Right.
It's very important to have a catchphrase. It's very important to have something that
To
the
loop
actual
you
person
into it.
is, and that's your launching point. For me, it's for Wells. It's now what is it you want in your depths of your ignorance? What is it you want? That's where I go.
We're talking about these impressions. They're all these classic, Vincent Price, Orson Welles, Johnny Carson.
Right.
Who is there any? Because they don't have movie stars anymore.
No, it's really hard to get.
No one does Brad Pitt.
Nobody does Brad Pitt. Although I wouldn't put it past James Adomian to work. He and Jim Meskimen are
I don't
two.
know Jim. I know James.
Yeah, Jim Meskimen is a wonderful voice actor, and he's got a channel on Instagram, on the YouTube as well. He does some very obscure impressions. He's Marion Ross's son.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And he does for some very, and Ross Marquand from The Walking Dead does what he calls micro impressions, and they're little thing he does a John Malkovich that'll friggin' slay you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like right up there with.
Yeah, I guess he's Bill Hader.
Haters. It's right up there with Haters.
Yeah.
I'm just, there's just people you can't key. I mean, everybody does a Trump. I don't think my Trump is particularly good, but I mean, but again, it's larger than life. I'll tell you an obscure impression I do, but it's still, again, from our childhood. I think the world's only Bill Bixby.
Okay, I'm ready.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
And
David Banner is believed to be dead.
And here's the thing about that time period. It's not David Banner. The character's name is Bruce Banner.
So how'd they fix it?
Well, the thing is, back then, in the late 70s,
right,
Bruce was a derogatory slang for gay guys.
Oh, was it? I always thought it was just for Australians.
Nope. You'll hear
Michael Baldwin Bruce.
You'll hear like old Carson shows if you watch them. A couple of guys named Bruce.
Yeah. No, I didn't know that.
And that's what. Yeah, that was what it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it can't be named Bruce.
Well, yeah. Meanwhile, Bruce Jenner took home a bunch of
Americans. Well, maybe they were onto something.
Hold on now. But I remember they went in for a close-up on his supposed gravestone, you know, and it said David Bruce Banner. So that's how they faced. Oh, Bruce was his middle name, but David was just a very compassionate name. Yeah, a couple of guys named Bruce. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Before we go, what is murder? I want to say murder anyway. But
murder anyway.
No, it's
murder anyone.
Murder anyone.
It's not an injunction.
It's
to just
murder anyone.
Murder anyone? Because otherwise, it sounds like it's like an indiscriminate serial killer.
Right. No, it's
murder anyone.
It's a film that you made. It's on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like an 87.
And 88. It had 100 for we had one guy that didn't love it.
Yeah,
we were running at 100 for about 5 days.
Yeah.
Murder Anyone is an independent film directed by James Cullen Bressack, whom I've known since he was 4, and I'm one of 7 people on the planet allowed to call him Jimmy.
And now he's 11, and he made a movie.
Now he's 30. He made 30 movies before his 30th birthday.
Wow.
And this is from a script by his father, who was my dear friend, James Gordon Bressack, who won 3 Emmys for writing Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain.
Okay.
And clever guy, and it really is a movie about the creative process.
Right.
And a love letter from a father to a son, or from a son to a father, pardon me.
Oh, yeah, because he's directing his dad's script. Not unlike Mank.
Exactly like Mank, which I had some small involvement with.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I actually had a beautifully hour and a half meeting with Fincher at his office, and he talked about his dad's script and his wanting to make his dad's dream come true, even though he was long gone. And I did. Well, I won't say I coached. I'll say that I recorded every line that Wells has in that movie in a recording studio, and the actor playing Wells was learned off of that. Right. And he had a different dialogue coach, but he learned off of that. But there are certain things. Fincher said electronically, his father was the first. Going back to Sherlock Holmes, his father was the first Dr. Watson in the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, okay.
And his first name is Tom, and it's eluding me his last name, and I should know this. But I can only think of Edward Hardwicke, who was the second Watson. And I actually liked the first one very much because he was a handsome man, and Watson was supposed to be a bit of a womanizer.
Right.
So, not a womanizer, a ladies' man, shall we say. So there are words and phrases throughout Mank where I go, oh, they used me there.
Right.
They used me there. And then they weave, but it's electronic. It's maybe a little AI thing. I don't know, but I'm in there somewhere, but I'm uncredited. Much like Ed Wood.
Like Ed Wood.
I'm uncredited. We actually offered to give back some of the money if you just give me credit. And they said, keep the money. We're not giving you credit.
Right.
And Vincent did a brilliant performance. I always have to say this. I mean, nothing to take anything away from Vincent D'Onofrio. His performance as Orson Welles was the best on-camera performance ever.
That was fantastic.
But Tim Burton felt he couldn't quite hit the depths of Welles. So being an animator and being a cartoon fan, he said, "Get me the guy who does the brain." So I went up to San Francisco and dubbed it. And it's funny. I was talking to Bobcat about this, and he said the only thing that jars you is it's not the right room resonance. And I remembered thinking we should have. I thought this years ago. We should have gone to Musso's and looped the film in Musso's.
That's how good Bobcat is, because I was in the car when he said that. With you, but I was like, I have seen that movie 400 times.
Yeah.
And that never struck me.
It bothered me from the very first time. I thought the resonance was wrong. We were in a padded room. So anyway, Murder Anyone. I actually get to play a lead in this film. I've been lately. I've just sort of said yes to everything. Any friend of mine is doing a small film, a student film, I'll do it. But this one I'm playing Gordon basically.
Right.
And it's him and his real life partner. Plays my partner in the film, Charles M. Howell IV, and together they won multiple Emmys. And we're writing this play that becomes a movie, and it's bizarre and it's crazy, and the fun comes from watching us write it, and then it comes to life on screen.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing.
Yeah.
It's you see you guys writing it, and then you see what you're writing. It's sort of like, is it 4 characters in search of an exit? Or there's a night gallery that Rod Serling wrote called Midnight Never Ends, which is a writer trying to get to the end of a short story and he can't, and you go through it with the characters,
right?
And then you cut back to him going, nope, that's not it.
That probably that would be something that Gordon might have drawn on for inspiration, because I saw it in play form. It works much better as a film. I think it's hilarious. There's lots of big laughs in it. And then if you're going to, and I do ask you to, dear listener, it's on all the platforms. You can rent it on Amazon Prime. You can rent it on iTunes. Stay for the credit sequence, because there's a lovely moment in the credit sequence where it's not quite a Marvel thing, but it's there. So it's for me a return to being on camera. And
murder anyone, and you can see the face behind the voice.
Murder anyone.
Murder anyone. Maurice Lamarche, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Available now in your grocer's freezer.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould bound.
We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley, with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Hey, if you like the show, why don't you drop us a line at show@danagould.com. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out! You want me? Peace out!